Rome, often hailed as the Eternal City, boasts a history that stretches back over 2.5 millennia, beginning with its legendary founding in 753 BCE by the twin brothers Romulus and Remus, who, according to myth, were raised by a she-wolf on the Palatine Hill after being abandoned in the Tiber River. This foundational tale, immortalized in Roman lore and later by historians like Livy, symbolizes the city's origins as a small settlement of Latin tribes amidst the 7 hills along the Tiber, which provided natural defenses and fertile land, allowing it to grow from a modest village into a dominant power in the Italian peninsula. By the 6th century BCE, Rome was under the rule of Etruscan kings, with figures like Tarquinius Superbus overseeing the construction of early infrastructure such as the Cloaca Maxima sewer system and the Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill. But the monarchy's tyranny led to its overthrow in 509 BCE, marking the birth of the Roman Republic, a period characterized by a complex system of governance involving the Senate, consuls, and assemblies that balanced power among patricians and plebeians, during which Rome expanded through military conquests, first subduing neighboring Latin and Sabine tribes, then defeating the Etruscans and Samnites in a series of wars that solidified control over central Italy by the 3rd century BCE. The Republic's ambitions soon turned outward, clashing with Carthage in the Punic Wars, 264 or 146 BCE, a trilogy of epic conflicts that saw Hannibal's daring invasion over the Alps in the Second Punic War, only to be countered by Scipio Africanus's victory at Zama, resulting in Rome's acquisition of Sicily, Sardinia, Spain, and North Africa, transforming it into a Mediterranean superpower, while internal reforms like the Gracchus brothers' attempts to address land inequality highlighted growing social tensions between the wealthy elite and the impoverished masses. As the Republic matured, figures like Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla reformed the military and engaged in civil wars that eroded republican institutions, paving the way for Julius Caesar's rise, who, after conquering Gaul and crossing the Rubicon in 49 BCE, declared himself dictator, implemented calendar reforms, and expanded citizenship. But his assassination on the Ides of March in 44 BCE by Brutus and Cassius sparked further chaos, leading to the second triumvirate of Mark Antony, Lepidus, and Octavian, whose power struggles culminated in Octavian's victory at Actium in 31 BCE and his ascension as Augustus, the first Roman emperor in 27 BCE, ushering in the Pax Romana, a 200-year era of relative peace and prosperity, during which the empire reached its zenith under emperors like Trajan and Hadrian, expanding to encompass Britain, Dacia, Mesopotamia, and beyond, with monumental constructions such as the Colosseum, built under Vespasian and Titus in 70-80 CE for gladiatorial games and public spectacles, the Pantheon, rebuilt by Hadrian around 126 CE with its iconic dome, aqueducts that supplied water to a city of over 1 million inhabitants, and an extensive road network like the Appian Way that facilitated trade, military movement, and cultural exchange across a domain stretching from the Atlantic to the Euphrates. The empire's golden age also saw literary flourishes from Virgil, Ovid, and Horace, philosophical contributions from Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, and legal advancements that formed the basis of Western jurisprudence. Yet by the 3rd century CE, crises including economic inflation, barbarian invasions, and internal strife under the Severan dynasty and the chaotic Barracks emperors weakened the state, prompting Diocletian's reforms in 284 CE that divided the empire into East and West, and established the Tetrarchy to stabilize administration. Though Constantine the Great's conversion to Christianity in 312 CE, after the Battle of Milvian Bridge, and the founding of Constantinople in 330 CE, shifted the empire's center eastward, while the Western Empire faced mounting pressures from Germanic tribes like the Visigoths, who sacked Rome in 410 CE under Alaric, and the Vandals, who did so again in 455 CE, culminating in the deposition of the last Western emperor Romulus Augustulus by Odoacer in 476 CE, often marked as the fall of the Western Roman Empire, though the Eastern Byzantine Empire persisted for another millennium. In the ensuing Middle Ages, Rome devolved into a fragmented papal stronghold amid the ruins of its imperial glory, with the Catholic Church emerging as a dominant force under popes like Gregory the Great, 590–604 CE, who organized defenses against Lombard invasions and promoted missionary work, while the city endured sacks, plagues, and power struggles between the papacy and Holy Roman emperors like Charlemagne, crowned in Rome in 800 CE, symbolizing a revival of imperial authority in the West, though periods of decline, such as the 10th century pornocracy, under corrupt papal families, contrasted with reforms by figures like Hildebrand, Pope Gregory VII, in the 11th century, who asserted papal supremacy in the investiture controversy against Emperor Henry IV. The medieval era also witnessed architectural endeavors, including the construction of Romanesque basilicas and the fortification of the Aurelian walls. But Rome's population dwindled to mere tens of thousands, ravaged by events like the Black Death in 1348, until the Renaissance sparked a cultural rebirth in the 14th and 15th centuries, fueled by the return of the papacy from Avignon in 1377, and patronage from popes like Nicholas V and Julius II, who commissioned masterpieces from artists such as Michelangelo, who painted the Sistine Chapel ceiling, 1508–1512, and sculpted the Pietà, Raphael, who adorned the Vatican stanza, and Bramante, who began the reconstruction of St. Peter's Basilica, transforming Rome into a hub of humanism, art, and learning that drew scholars like Erasmus and architects who revived classical styles, blending them with Baroque innovations under Bernini and Borromini in the 17th century, evident in fountains like the Trevi and squares like Piazza Navona. The city's political landscape evolved through the Renaissance, with conflicts involving powerful families like the Medici and Borgias, and later, the counter-Reformation efforts of the Council of Trent, 1545–1563, which reinforced Catholics' doctrine amid Protestant challenges, while the 18th century brought Enlightenment influences and occupations, such as Napoleon's invasion in 1798 that briefly established a Roman Republic, only for papal rule to be restored in 1814. The 19th century Risorgimento movement for Italian unification saw Rome as a focal point, with Giuseppe Garibaldi's failed attempts in 1849 and eventual capture by Italian forces in 1870, making it the capital of the Kingdom of Italy under Victor Emmanuel II, displacing the Papal States and confining the Pope to the Vatican, a tension resolved by the Lateran Treaty of 1929 under Mussolini, which established Vatican City as an independent state. During the Fascist era, 1922–1943, Mussolini sought to revive Roman grandeur through projects like the Via dei Fori Imperiali and the EUR district, but World War II brought devastation, with Allied bombings in 1943 and the German occupation until liberation in 1944, followed by post-war reconstruction that fueled the Italian economic miracle of the 1950s and 1960s, turning Rome into a modern metropolis while preserving its ancient heritage as seen in the preservation of sites like the Forum Romanum and the Colosseum, which became UNESCO World Heritage Sites. In the contemporary era, Rome has navigated challenges like political instability, immigration, and tourism booms, hosting events such as the 1960 Olympics and the Jubilee year 2000, while grappling with issues like urban sprawl, traffic congestion, and climate change impacts on its historic structures. Yet it remains a vibrant global city of about 2.8 million people, blending millennia of history with modern life, where ancient ruins coexist with bustling piazzas, Renaissance palaces, and contemporary art scenes, embodying an enduring legacy that continues to captivate the world through its art, architecture, cuisine, and cultural influence, from the gladiatorial arenas of old to the cinematic streets, immortalized in films like La Dolce Vita, ensuring that Rome's story is far from over, perpetually evolving as a testament to human achievement and resilience. Expanded history of Rome. Delving deeper into eras and events, building upon the foundational overview of Rome's history, let us delve deeper into the intricate tapestry of its evolution, starting with the prehistoric and legendary origins that predate the traditional founding date of 753 BCE, where archaeological evidence from sites like the Palatine Hill reveals settlements as early as the 10th century BCE, inhabited by Italic tribes who practiced agriculture, herding and rudimentary metallurgy amidst the volcanic landscape of Latium, influenced by neighboring cultures such as the Villanovans to the north and the Greeks in southern Italy, whose myths of Aeneas fleeing Troy, later romanticized in Virgil's Aeneid, intertwined with local legends to form the Romulus and Remus narrative, symbolizing themes of fratricide, divine favor, and destiny that would permeate Roman identity. Transitioning to the regal period, 753–509 BCE, Rome was governed by 7 kings, beginning with Romulus, who established the Senate as an advisory body of elders and organized the population into tribes and curiae for military and political purposes, followed by Numa Pompilius, credited with instituting religious institutions like the Vestal Virgins and the calendar, Tullus Hostilius, a warrior king who conquered Alba Longa and integrated its people, Ancus Marcius, who expanded the city to the Aventine Hill and built the first bridge over the Tiber, Pons Sublicius, and the Etruscan trio of Tarquinius Priscus, Servius Tullius, and Tarquinius Superbus, under whom Rome saw significant urbanization, including the draining of the Forum Valley via the Cloaca Maxima, the erection of the Circus Maximus for chariot races, and the fortification of the Servian Wall. Though Servius's reforms, which reorganized society into centuries based on wealth for voting and military service, aimed at inclusivity but couldn't prevent the aristocracy's revolt against Superbus's tyranny, sparked by the rape of Lucretia and leading to the establishment of the Republic with Lucius Junius Brutus as one of the first consuls. The early Republic, 509–264 BCE, was marked by internal strife and external expansion, as the conflict of the orders pitted patricians against plebeians, resulting in milestones like the Lex Licinia Sextia, 367 BCE, allowing plebeian consuls, the Lex Hortensia, 287 BCE, making plebeian assembly decisions binding, and the creation of tribunes to protect commoners' rights, while militarily, Rome subdued the Latin League by 338 BCE, vanquished the Samnites in 3 grueling wars, 343–290 BCE, that secured Campania and central Italy, and repelled invasions like that of Pyrrhus of Epirus, 280–275 BCE, whose Pyrrhic victories ultimately failed, setting the stage for Rome's Mediterranean ambitions. The Middle Republic, 264–133 BCE, thrust Rome into global prominence through the Punic Wars, the first, 264–241 BCE, arising from disputes over Messina and ending with naval victories at Mylae and the Aegates Islands, annexing Sicily as Rome's first province, the second, 218–201 BCE, featuring Hannibal's audacious Alpine crossing with elephants, devastating defeats at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae, where 50,000 Romans perished, but countered by Fabius Maximus's delaying tactics and Scipio's Iberian campaigns, culminating in Hannibal's recall and defeat at Zama, which stripped Carthage of its empire and imposed heavy indemnities, while the third, 149–146 BCE, saw the utter destruction of Carthage by Scipio Aemilianus, famously sowing its fields with salt, paralleled by conquests in Greece, Corinth sacked in 146 BCE, Macedonia, and Asia Minor, enriching Rome with Hellenistic art, philosophy, and slaves, but exacerbating social divides as latifundia, large estates, displaced small farmers, leading to Tiberius Gracchus's land reforms in 133 BCE, his assassination, and his brother Gaius's continuation, which fueled populist movements. The late Republic, 133–27 BCE, descended into turmoil with Marius's professionalization of the army, recruiting landless men loyal to generals rather than the state, his 7 consulships, and victories over the Cimbri and Teutons, contrasted by Sulla's dictatorship, 82–79 BCE, prescriptions that executed thousands, and constitutional reforms favoring the Optimates, setting precedents for civil wars involving Pompey, Crassus, and Julius Caesar, who formed the first triumvirate in 60 BCE, with Caesar's Gallic Wars, 58–50 BCE, adding vast territories chronicled in his commentary De Bello Gallico, and his crossing of the Rubicon igniting war, victories at Pharsalus and in Egypt, where he allied with Cleopatra, reforms including the Julian calendar, debt relief, and colonial foundations, but his perpetual dictatorship provoked the conspiracy of 60 senators, stabbing him 23 times in Pompey's theater. The ensuing power vacuum birthed the Second Triumvirate, 43 BCE, of Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus, who proscribed enemies like Cicero and defeated Brutus and Cassius at Philippi, 42 BCE. But fractured alliances led to Antony's eastern entanglements with Cleopatra, defeated by Octavian at Actium, 31 BCE, resulting in their suicides and Octavian's sole rule, rebranded as Augustus, who cleverly restored the facade of the Republic while amassing power through titles like Princeps and Imperator, initiating the imperial era with administrative reforms dividing provinces into senatorial and imperial, founding the Praetorian Guard, and promoting moral legislation, while his successors in the Julio-Claudian dynasty included Tiberius, 14-37 CE, whose seclusion on Capri masked effective governance but ended in tyranny, Caligula, 37-41 CE, infamous for eccentricity like appointing his horse a senator and declaring himself a god, leading to his assassination, Claudius, 41-54 CE, who conquered Britain, expanded citizenship, and built the Portus Harbor, poisoned allegedly by Agrippina to install Nero, 54-68 CE, whose early rule under Seneca was promising but devolved into megalomania, the Great Fire of 64 CE, blamed on Christians, the construction of the Domus Aurea, and forced suicides of opponents, culminating in revolt and his own suicide, ending the dynasty. The year of the four emperors, 69 CE, saw Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and Vespasian vie for power, with Vespasian founding the Flavian dynasty, 69-96 CE, stabilizing the empire post-Nero's chaos by suppressing the Jewish revolt, culminating in the siege of Jerusalem and destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, initiating the Colosseum on Nero's former lake and his sons Titus, 79-81 CE, who oversaw the Vesuvius eruption burying Pompeii and completed the amphitheater, and Domitian, 81-96 CE, a capable but autocratic ruler who expanded frontiers and built the palace on the Palatine, assassinated in a conspiracy. The Nerva Antonine dynasty, 96-192 CE, represented the empire's apogee, beginning with Nerva's brief rule adopting Trajan, 98-117 CE, the first provincial emperor, who conquered Dacia, evident in Trajan's column, Arabia and Mesopotamia, built forums, markets, and aqueducts, earning the title Optimus Princeps, followed by Hadrian, 117-138 CE, who withdrew from overextended territories, constructed Hadrian's Wall in Britain, the Pantheon, and his villa at Tivoli, fostering Hellenic culture, then Antoninus Pius, 138-161 CE, with a peaceful reign focused on justice and infrastructure, Marcus Aurelius, 161-180 CE, the philosopher-emperor whose meditations embodied Stoicism amid wars against Parthians and Marcomanni, co-ruling initially with Lucius Verus and Commodus 180-192 CE, whose gladiatorial obsessions and corruption echoed Caligula, ending in strangulation and ushering in the Severan dynasty, 193-235 CE, after the year of the five emperors, with Septimius Severus, 193-211 CE, strengthening the military, conquering Parthia, and dying in York, his sons Caracalla and Geta, co-rulers until Geta's murder, with Caracalla, 211-217 CE, granting universal citizenship via the Antonine Constitution but known for baths and brutality, assassinated en route to war, followed by Macrinus's brief usurpation and the young Elagabalus, 218-222 CE, a controversial priest-emperor imposing Syrian cults, replaced by Severus Alexander, 222-235 CE, whose mother-dominated rule ended in mutiny amid Germanic threats, precipitating the crisis of the 3rd century, 235-284 CE, a chaotic period of nearly 50 years with over 20 emperors, many assassinated, plagued by inflation, debased currency, barbarian incursions, like the Goths sacking Athens in 267 CE, the Palmyrene Empire under Zenobia breaking away, and the Gallic Empire in the west, until Aurelian, 270–275 CE, reunited the empire, built new walls around Rome, and was murdered, leading to Diocletian, 284–305 CE, who reformed the Tetrarchy with Maximian, Galerius, and Constantius, persecuting Christians, fixing prices to combat inflation, and retiring to split, though his system collapsed into civil wars won by Constantine, 306–337 CE, who legalized Christianity via the Edict of Milan, 313 CE, convened the Council of Nicaea, 325 CE, to address Arianism, and refounded Byzantium as Constantinople, shifting focus eastward while Rome declined. The late empire, 337–476 CE, saw division among Constantine's sons, Julian the Apostates, 361–363 CE, pagan revival, and Valentinian bound 364–375 CE, fortifying borders, but Theodosius I, 379–395 CE, made Christianity the state religion, banned paganism, and split the empire permanently between his sons Arcadius, east, and Honorius, west, with the west facing Alaric's Visigothic sack of Rome in 410 CE, the first in 800 years, prompting Augustine's City of God as a theological response, followed by Attila the Hun's invasion halted by Pope Leo I in 452 CE, the Vandal sack under Gaiseric in 455 CE, and a succession of puppet emperors controlled by Germanic generals like Ricimer, until Odoacer deposed Romulus Augustulus in 476 CE, sending imperial regalia to Constantinople and ruling as king, marking the conventional end of the Western Empire, though Byzantine Emperor Justinian reconquered Italy briefly in the 6th century via Belisarius, establishing the Exarchate of Ravenna, only for Lombards to invade in 568 CE, fragmenting the peninsula. Medieval Rome, 476–1300 CE, transformed into a Byzantine outpost then papal domain, with popes like Gregory the Great, 590–604 CE, negotiating with Lombards, converting Anglo-Saxons via Augustine of Canterbury, and administering the city amid plagues and famines, while the 8th century saw alliances with Franks, culminating in Charlemagne's coronation by Leo III in 800 CE, founding the Holy Roman Empire, though conflicts arose, such as the iconoclastic controversy and the 9th century Saracen raids sacking St. Peter's in 846 CE, prompting the Leonine Walls. The 10th century Dark Ages featured the rule of the harlots with figures like Marozia controlling popes, but Otto I's intervention in 962 CE revived imperial papal ties, leading to the 11th century Gregorian reforms under Gregory VII, who excommunicated Henry IV in the investiture controversy, forcing his penance at Canossa in 1077, while the Crusades, 1095–1291, brought wealth and relics to Rome, and the 12th century saw Arnold of Brescia's republican revolt against papal temporal power, suppressed by Frederick Barbarossa. The High Middle Ages included Innocent III, 1198–1216, who asserted papal supremacy over kings, convened the Fourth Lateran Council, and supported the Franciscans and Dominicans, but the 13th century Avignon papacy, 1309–1377, relocated the Curia to France under Clement Febvre, causing the Western Schism, 1378–1417, with multiple popes, resolved at the Council of Constance, during which Rome suffered neglect, population declined to 20,000, and ruins overgrown, yet cultural seeds of the Renaissance germinated with Petrarch's humanism. The Renaissance, 14th–16th centuries, revitalized Rome as the papacy returned under Martin V in 1417, with Nicholas V, 1447–1455, founding the Vatican Library and planning urban renewal, drawing artists like Alberti, while the High Renaissance, under Julius II, 1503–1513, and Leo X, 1513–1521, commissioned Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel frescoes depicting Genesis and the Last Judgment, Raphael's School of Athens and the Stanze, Bramante's Tempietto and St. Peter's design, and the rebuilding of the Basilica, financed partly by indulgences that sparked Luther's Reformation, while the sack of Rome in 1527 by Charles the Friar's mutinous troops devastated the city, killing thousands and looting art. Yet recovery under Paul III included the Council of Trent, 1545-1563, for Counter-Reformation, Michelangelo's Capitoline Hill redesign, and the Jesuit order's founding by Ignatius Loyola. The Baroque era, 17th century, flourished under Urban VIII and Innocent Guix, with Bernini's Ecstasy of St. Teresa, Baldacchino in St. Peter's, and Fountain of the Four Rivers in Piazza Navona, Borromini's spiraling San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane, and Caravaggio's dramatic chiaroscuro paintings amid scientific advancements like Galileo's trial in 1633. While the 18th century Enlightenment brought neoclassical revivals, Piranesi's etchings of ruins, and Winckelmann's art history, though political upheavals included the Jesuit suppression in 1773 and Napoleon's occupation, 1798-1799, establishing a short-lived Roman Republic inspired by the French Revolution, dissolved by Neapolitan forces, with Pius VI exiled and dying in France, followed by Pius VII's restoration in 1814 post-Napoleon, clashing with the emperor over concordats. The 19th century Risorgimento unified Italy, with Mazzini's Young Italy, Garibaldi's Red Shirts capturing Sicily in 1860, and Victor Emmanuel II's kingdom annexing most papal territories, though Rome remained papal until French withdrawal during the Franco-Prussian War allowed Italian troops to breach Porta Pia in 1870, declaring Rome the capital, confining Pius IX to the Vatican as a prisoner, and prompting the law of guarantees, while the city modernized with railways, boulevards, and the Tiber embankments to prevent floods. The 20th century under the Kingdom of Italy saw population growth, but fascist rule from 1922 under Mussolini emphasized Romanità, excavating the Forum, building the Via della Conciliazione to St. Peter's, and the EUR exposition site for a planned 1942 World's Fair, aborted by war during which Mussolini allied with Hitler, declaring war in 1940, leading to Allied bombings in 1943, the German occupation after Italy's armistice, the Ardeatine Caves massacre of 335 civilians in reprisal for partisan attacks, and liberation by Allies on June 4, 1944, followed by the 1946 referendum abolishing the monarchy and establishing the Republic. With Rome as capital, experiencing the post-war boom, Miracolo Economico, driven by industries, tourism, and cinema, as Fellini's films captured its vibrancy, hosting the 1960 Olympics, with venues like the Palazzo dello Sport and the Second Vatican Council, 1962-1965, under John Paul III and Paul VI modernizing the Church. The late 20th and early 21st centuries navigated terrorism, years of lid with Red Brigades assassinating Aldo Moro in 1978, political scandals like Tangentopoli in the 1990s dismantling parties, immigration waves enriching multiculturalism, and global events like the Great Jubilee of 2000 drawing millions, the 2005 Papal Conclave electing Benedict XVI, then Francis in 2013, while challenges include preserving heritage amid tourism, over 10 million visitors annually pre-COVID, earthquakes like 2016 damaging historic sites, climate initiatives for sustainability, and urban projects like the Metro Sea Line uncovering ancient artifacts, ensuring Rome's narrative as a palimpsest of civilizations continues to unfold, from its mythical wolf-nurtured founders to a modern metropolis where history breathes in every cobblestone street, arch, and fountain, inspiring endless fascination and scholarly pursuit. Modern developments and contemporary legacy, continuing seamlessly from the vibrant interplay of Rome's ancient roots with its modern dynamism. The 21st century has positioned the Eternal City as a pivotal player on the global stage, navigating the complexities of globalization, technological advancement, and environmental stewardship while safeguarding its unparalleled historical patrimony, as evidenced by the election of Pope Francis in 2013, the first Jesuit and Latin American pontiff, whose emphasis on humility, social justice, and ecological concerns, articulated in his encyclical Laudato Si, 2015, has resonated worldwide. drawing pilgrims to Vatican City for audiences and events like the Extraordinary Jubilee of Mercy in 2016, which saw the opening of holy doors across the globe and boosted Rome's tourism economy, already a cornerstone with iconic sites like the Spanish Steps, restored in 2016 with Bulgari funding, the Trevi Fountain, refurbished in 2015, and the Colosseum, undergoing ongoing conservation to combat pollution and visitor wear, including a 2021 project to reinstall its arena floor for cultural events. Yet this influx of over 30 million visitors annually pre-pandemic has strained infrastructure, prompting initiatives like the 2018 pedestrianization of areas around the Forum and the introduction of eco-friendly electric buses to mitigate traffic and emissions in the historic center, a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1980, encompassing 430 hectares of layered history from Etruscan tombs to Baroque palaces. Politically, Rome has weathered Italy's turbulent governance, including the mayoral terms of Ignazio Marino, 2013-2015, marred by scandals leading to his resignation, followed by Virginia Raggi, 2016-2021, the first female mayor from the Five-Star Movement, who focused on anti-corruption. Waste management reforms addressing the chronic garbage crisis exacerbated by mafia infiltration in landfills, and sustainable urban planning, though challenges persisted with public transport strikes and infrastructure decay, such as the 2018 collapse of an escalator in Repubblica metro station injuring fans during a Champions League match, highlighting the need for modernization amid budget constraints. The election of Roberto Gualtieri in 2021, a center-left academic, has prioritized recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, which hit Rome hard in 2020 with lockdowns emptying streets of tourists, closing the Vatican museums for months, and causing economic losses estimated at $12 billion, but also fostering innovations like virtual tours of the Sistine Chapel and accelerated digitization of archives, while post-pandemic rebounds saw a surge in revenge tourism by 2023, coinciding with events like the Ryder Cup golf tournament, hosted at Marco Simone Golf Club, transforming a former papal hunting ground into a modern venue. Environmentally, Rome grapples with climate change impacts, including severe heat waves like the 2022 record of 40 degrees Celsius, prompting water rationing and tree planting campaigns under the Rome Green Plan to expand urban forests, mitigating the urban heat island effect in densely built areas like Trastevere, where medieval alleys blend with trendy eateries serving carbonara and amatriciana, and addressing flooding risks along the Tiber, fortified since the 1870s but tested by storms as in 2014 when the river overflowed, damaging Ponte Milvio, the ancient bridge where Constantine reportedly saw his vision before Milvian Bridge. Culturally, the city thrives as a cinematic and artistic hub, with productions like the 2019 Netflix series Subura, depicting its underbelly of crime and politics, inspired by real scandals, and festivals such as the Rome Film Fest at the Auditorium. Parco della Musica, designed by Renzo Piano in 2002, while contemporary art spaces like Maxi, Zaha Hadid's 2010 masterpiece, showcase installations blending futurism with antiquity, and street art in neighborhoods like Ostiense transforms industrial ruins into vibrant murals echoing Banksy's influence. Economically, Rome's GDP, driven by services, tourism, and government, as Italy's capital hosting parliament in Palazzo Montecitorio and the Quirinal Palace as presidential residence, faces disparities between affluent historic districts and peripheral suburbs like Tor Bella Monica, plagued by unemployment and organized crime, prompting social programs under EU funding, such as the 2021-2027 Recovery Plan, allocating billions for digital transition, green energy, including solar panels on historic rooftops, and infrastructure like the completion of Metro C, which has unearthed artifacts like a second-century barracks during excavations, enriching museums like the Capitoline with new exhibits. In terms of international relations, Rome hosts numerous UN agencies, including FAO headquarters in the former Ethiopian embassy, addressing global hunger, and served as the venue for the 2021 G20 summit, where leaders discussed climate and vaccines, amid protests, underscoring the city's role as a diplomatic nexus while migration waves from Africa and the Middle East have diversified its population, leading to multicultural enclaves in Esquilino, celebrated in events like the Nota Bianca Cultural Night, though integration challenges persist with refugee centers and anti-immigration sentiments. Looking toward the future, Rome prepares for the 2025 Jubilee year, expected to draw 35 million pilgrims with infrastructure upgrades like high-speed rail links and restored holy sites, aiming for sustainability under Pope Francis's vision, while ongoing archaeological discoveries, such as the 2023 unearthing of a Nero-era theater near the Vatican, continually rewrite history books, ensuring that the city's narrative remains a living continuum where echoes of emperors, popes, and revolutionaries intermingle with the footsteps of modern inhabitants and visitors on the same cobblestones that have witnessed triumphs, tragedies, and transformations for over 2,700 years, from the mythical she-wolf's lair to a smart city, aspiring to balance heritage preservation with innovative progress, embodying resilience in the face of time's relentless march and inspiring generations to come with its timeless allure as Caput Mundi, the head of the world. Word count, approximately 1,800. This continuation focuses on 21st century developments for a seamless narrative flow. The history of Rome, often dubbed the Eternal City, spans over 2,700 years, beginning with its legendary founding in 753 BC by Romulus, the son of the war god Mars who, according to myth, was raised by a she-wolf alongside his twin brother Remus, on the Palatine Hill along the Tiber River in central Italy. This Italic settlement, initially a small village in the regions of Etruria and Latium, grew through a combination of strategic location for trade, fertile lands, and military conquests, evolving into a powerful kingdom ruled by 7 legendary kings, including Romulus, who established the Senate, and later monarchs like Numa Pompilius, who introduced religious institutions, and Tarquinius Superbus, whose tyrannical rule led to the monarchy's overthrow in 509 BC. During this regal period, Rome expanded its influence over neighboring Latin tribes, built foundational infrastructure like the Cloaca Maxima sewer system, and adopted Etruscan influences in architecture, religion, and governance, setting the stage for its transformation into a republic. The Roman Republic, established around 509 BC after the expulsion of the last king, marked a shift to a system of elected magistrates, including consuls, praetors, and tribunes, balanced by the Senate's advisory role and the assemblies of the people embodying the principle of res publica or public affair. This era was characterized by internal struggles between patricians and plebeians, leading to reforms like the 12 Tables in 450 BC, which codified laws, and the gradual equalization of rights through measures such as the Lex Hortensia in 287 BC. Externally, Rome embarked on relentless expansion, first conquering the Italian peninsula by the mid-3rd century BC through wars against the Samnites, Etruscans, and Greeks in the south, then clashing with Carthage in the Punic Wars 264 or 146 BC, which saw Hannibal's daring invasion over the Alps in the Second Punic War, Rome's near defeat at Cannae in 216 BC, and ultimate victory under Scipio, Africanus at Zama in 202 BC, resulting in the destruction of Carthage and Roman dominance over the western Mediterranean. The Republic's zenith in the 2nd and 1st centuries BC brought vast wealth from conquest in Greece, Asia Minor, and Gaul, but also sowed seeds of instability through social unrest, land inequality addressed by the Gracchi brothers' reforms, slave revolts like Spartacus's in 73 to 71 BC, and power struggles among generals such as Marius, Sulla, Pompey, and Julius Caesar, culminating in civil wars that eroded republican institutions. Julius Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon in 49 BC sparked a civil war, leading to his dictatorship, assassination on the Ides of March in 44 BC, and the rise of his adopted heir Octavian, who, after defeating Mark Antony and Cleopatra at Actium in 31 BC, became Augustus in 27 BC, effectively founding the Roman Empire while maintaining the facade of the Republic. The imperial period from 27 BC to 476 AD saw Rome reach its territorial peak under emperors like Trajan, r. 98-117 AD, encompassing Britain, much of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, with a population exceeding 50 million, and innovations in engineering such as aqueducts, roads like the Appian Way, and monumental architecture including the Colosseum, completed 80 AD, and Pantheon. The Pax Romana, a 200-year era of relative peace from Augustus to Marcus Aurelius, r. 161–180 AD, fostered cultural flourishing with figures like Virgil, Ovid, and Seneca, the spread of Christianity after Jesus' crucifixion around 30 AD, and legal advancements under Justinian's later code, though plagued by tyrannical rulers like Caligula and Nero, whose excesses included the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD and persecutions of Christians. The 3rd century crisis brought invasions by Goths and Persians, economic collapse and rapid emperor turnovers, stabilized temporarily by Diocletian's tetrarchy in 284 AD, and Constantine's conversion to Christianity in 312 AD, moving the capital to Constantinople in 330 AD and issuing the Edict of Milan in 313 AD tolerating Christianity. The Western Roman Empire declined amid barbarian invasions, economic woes, and internal decay, culminating in the sack of Rome by the Visigoths in 410 AD, and the deposition of the last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, by Odoacer in 476 AD, while the Eastern Byzantine Empire endured until 1453. Post-imperial Rome, under Ostrogothic rule then Byzantine reconquest by Justinian in the 6th century, became a shadow of its former self, ravaged by plagues like the one in 542 AD and Lombard invasions, reducing its population from over 1 million to mere tens of thousands by the 7th century. The rise of the papacy, with figures like Pope Gregory the Great or 596–04, positioned Rome as the center of Western Christianity, leading to the Carolingian alliance when Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne Holy Roman Emperor in 800 AD, intertwining Rome's fate with the Holy Roman Empire. Medieval Rome witnessed the investiture controversy between popes and emperors, the Norman sack in 1084, and communal revolts like Cola di Rienzo's brief republic in 1347, amid the Black Death's devastation in 1348, while the Avignon papacy, 1309–1377, saw popes relocate to France, fracturing unity until the Great Schism's resolution in 1417. The Renaissance revitalized Rome from the 15th century, with popes like Nicholas V and Julius II patronizing artists, such as Michelangelo, who painted the Sistine Chapel ceiling 1508–1512, and architects like Bramante redesigning St. Peter's Basilica, transforming the city into a hub of humanism, art, and learning, fueled by rediscovered classical texts and the influx of wealth from indulgences, though marred by the sack of Rome in 1527 by Charles I's troops. The Counter-Reformation in the 16th century, spearheaded by the Council of Trent, 1545–1563, reinforced Catholic doctrine against Protestantism, with Baroque innovations by Bernini and Borromini, adorning squares like Piazza Navona and fountains like the Trevi, while the Jesuits, founded in 1540, expanded papal influence globally. In the 17th and 18th centuries, Rome's political power waned under absolutist popes and foreign interventions, including French occupation during the Napoleonic Wars, 1798–1814, when Pius VI was exiled and artifacts looted, but the city remained a grand tour destination for European elites, inspiring romantic poets like Byron and Keats. The 19th century Risorgimento unified Italy, with Giuseppe Garibaldi's failed 1849 Republic and successful 1860 campaigns leading to Rome's capture from papal control in 1870 under Victor Emmanuel, designating it the capital of the Kingdom of Italy in 1871, prompting urban modernization with new boulevards and monuments like the Vittoriano, completed 1911. The 20th century brought fascist rule under Benito Mussolini from 1922, who forged the Lateran Treaty in 1929, establishing Vatican City's independence, excavated ancient sites for propaganda, and aligned with Nazi Germany, resulting in Allied bombings during World War II, 1943–1944, and the city's liberation in 1944, followed by post-war reconstruction as a democratic republic's capital from 1946, hosting the 1960 Olympics, and becoming a symbol of La Dolce Vita through films like Fellini's La Dolce Vita, 1960. In the 21st century, Rome has navigated economic challenges, immigration and tourism booms, with over 10 million annual visitors exploring sites like the Forum, Vatican museums, and Spanish Steps, while addressing modern issues like climate change impacting historic preservation, urban sprawl, and political shifts, including the mayoralty of Virginia Raggi, 2016-2021, as the first female mayor, and ongoing excavations revealing layers of its multifaceted past, ensuring its enduring legacy as a cradle of Western civilization. The history of Rome, known as the Eternal City, is a continuous tapestry woven from its mythic origins through millennia of transformation, resilience, and reinvention, shaping Western civilization. According to legend, Rome was founded in 753 BC by Romulus, a descendant of the Trojan Aeneas and son of Mars, who, after being raised by a she-wolf with his twin Remus on the Palatine Hill, killed his brother in a dispute over the city's boundaries and became its first king. This small settlement along the Tiber River, strategically positioned for trade and defense in the fertile region between Etruria and Latium, grew under 7 legendary kings, from Romulus's establishment of the Senate to Numa Pompilius's religious reforms, including the creation of the Vestal Virgins, and Servius Tullius's introduction of the census and class-based governance. Etruscan influence shaped early Rome's urban planning, with the Cloaca Maxima sewer and the Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, while conflicts with neighboring tribes like the Sabines forged a martial culture. The monarchy's end came in 509 BC, when Tarquinius Superbus's tyranny, culminating in the rape of Lucretia, sparked a revolt led by Lucius Junius Brutus, birthing the Roman Republic, a system of checks and balances with elected consuls, a powerful Senate, and popular assemblies. The Republic, 509-27 BC, was a crucible of social and military evolution. Early on, class struggles between patricians and plebeians drove reforms. The 12 tables of 450 BC codified laws, the creation of tribunes gave plebeians veto power, and the Lex Hortensia of 287 BC made plebiscites binding, leveling political rights. Militarily, Rome subdued the Italian peninsula by defeating Samnites, Etruscans, and Greek colonies in the Pyrrhic Wars, 280-275 BC, establishing hegemony by the mid-3rd century BC. The Punic Wars against Carthage, 264-146 BC, were defining. The first secured Sicily, the second saw Hannibal's devastating invasion and Rome's resilience under Fabius Maximus's delaying tactics and Scipio Africanus's victory at Zama in 202 BC, and the third raised Carthage, cementing Rome's Mediterranean dominance. Expansion into Greece, Macedon, and Asia Minor brought immense wealth, but strained the Republic's social fabric. Land reforms by the Gracchi brothers in the 130s-120s BC aimed to address inequality, but provoked elite backlash, while slave revolts, like Spartacus's in 73-71 BC, exposed systemic tensions. Ambitious generals like Marius, who reformed the army, and Sulla, who marched on Rome in 88 BC, eroded republican norms. The first triumvirate of Pompey, Crassus, and Julius Caesar in 60 BC concentrated power, but Caesar's conquest of Gaul, crossing of the Rubicon in 49 BC, and dictatorship led to his assassination in 44 BC, plunging Rome into civil war. Octavian, Caesar's heir, outmaneuvered Mark Antony and Cleopatra, winning at Actium in 31 BC, and as Augustus in 27 BC, he inaugurated the Roman Empire, cloaking autocracy in republican forms. The empire, 27 BC 476 AD, marked Rome's zenith and eventual decline. Augustus's Pax Romana, 27 BC 180 AD, brought stability, integrating provinces through Roman law, roads, and aqueducts, while cultural giants like Virgil, who penned the Aeneid, and engineers building the Colosseum, 70-80 AD, defined an era. The empire peaked under Trajan, R98-117 AD, stretching from Scotland to Mesopotamia, but emperors like Nero, blamed for the 64 AD Great Fire, and Domitian's autocracy stirred unrest, including early Christian persecutions. The 3rd century, crisis, 235–284 AD, saw invasions by Goths and Sassanids, hyperinflation, and nearly 50 emperors, many assassinated, until Diocletian's tetrarchy and economic reforms restored order. Constantine's conversion to Christianity after the Battle of Milvian Bridge in 312 AD, the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, and the founding of Constantinople in 330 AD shifted the empire's center eastward, laying the foundation for the Byzantine Empire. The Western Empire crumbled under barbarian pressures. Visigoths sacked Rome in 410 AD, Vandals in 455 AD, and internal decay, with the last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, deposed by Odoacer in 476 AD while the East endured. Early medieval Rome, under Ostrogothic then Byzantine rule, faced depopulation from plagues like the Justinianic plague of 542 AD and Lombard invasions, shrinking to a fraction of its imperial size. The papacy emerged as a stabilizing force with Pope Gregory the Great, R590–604, fortifying Rome's spiritual and temporal role, leading to Charlemagne's coronation as Holy Roman Emperor in 800 AD, tying Rome to the Carolingian dynasty. The Middle Ages saw Rome caught in power struggles. The investiture controversy pitted popes against emperors. The Norman sack of 1084 devastated the city, and Cola di Rienzo's 1347 Republic briefly challenged papal authority. The Avignon Papacy, 1309–1377, and Great Schism, 1378–1417, weakened Rome, but the Renaissance, beginning in the 15th century, revived it as a cultural beacon. Popes like Julius II commissioned Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel frescoes, 1508–1512, and Bramante's St. Peter's Basilica, while scholars like Petrarch fueled humanism. The 1527 sack by Charles Fear's troops was a setback, but the Counter-Reformation, ignited by the Council of Trent, 1545–1563, reaffirmed Rome's Catholic primacy, with Baroque architects like Bernini shaping iconic spaces like St. Peter's Square. From the 17th century, Rome's political influence declined amid European wars and papal absolutism. Napoleon's occupation, 1798–1814, looted art and exiled Pius VII, but Rome remained a cultural magnet for grand tour travelers. The 19th century Risorgimento unified Italy, with Rome's capture in 1870 making it the capital in 1871, spurring modernization like the Termini Station and Via Nazionale. Mussolini's fascist regime, 1922 and 1943, aligned with the Vatican via the Lateran Treaty of 1929, excavated ancient sites, and built EUR, but World War II brought Allied bombings and liberation in 1944. Post-war Rome, as Italy's democratic capital, embraced modernity with the 1960 Olympics, became a cinematic icon through Fellini, and grew as a global tourism hub, with millions visiting the Colosseum, Pantheon, and Vatican annually. Today, Rome balances its ancient heritage with challenges like urban sprawl, climate threats to monuments, and political shifts, exemplified by Mayor Roberto Gualtieri's tenure since 2021, while ongoing archaeological discoveries, like those in the Forum, reaffirm its timeless significance. Rome's history, the Eternal City's journey, unfolds as a dynamic interplay of triumph, decline, and rebirth, each era building on the last to cement its enduring legacy. Following the legendary founding in 753 BC by Romulus, who established Rome's first institutions on the Palatine Hill, the city grew under the monarchy's 7 kings, whose reigns blended myth and history. Kings like Ancus Marcius expanded territory and built the port of Ostia, while Tullus Hostilius waged wars against Alba Longa, and Tarquinius Priscus, an Etruscan, enriched Rome with temples and the Circus Maximus. Etruscan influence deepened, introducing urban planning, drainage systems like the Cloaca Maxima, and religious rites, but the monarchy's collapse in 509 BC, triggered by Tarquinius Superbus's oppressive rule and the outrage over Lucretia's assault, ushered in the Roman Republic, a system of elected officials and shared power designed to prevent tyranny. The Republic, 509–27 BC, was a crucible of resilience and ambition. Internal tensions between patricians and plebeians spurred reforms. The creation of tribunes with veto power around 494 BC, the 12 Tables in 450 BC as a legal foundation, and the Lex Hortensia in 287 BC, granting plebeian assemblies legislative authority. Militarily, Rome unified Italy through relentless campaigns, defeating the Samnites in the Samnite Wars, 343–290 BC, and Pyrrhus of Epirus in 275 BC, securing southern Italy's Greek cities. The Punic Wars, 264–146 BC against Carthage defined Rome's ascent. The First Punic War won Sicily, the second survived Hannibal's genius through Scipio Africanus's victory at Zama in 202 BC, and the third obliterated Carthage, leaving Rome unchallenged in the western Mediterranean. Conquests in Greece, Asia Minor, and beyond brought wealth but also inequality, sparking the Gracchi brothers' land reforms, slave uprisings like Spartacus's, 73–71 BC, and power struggles among generals like Marius and Sulla, whose civil wars weakened republican norms. The first triumvirate of Pompey, Crassus, and Julius Caesar collapsed into Caesar's dictatorship, his assassination in 44 BC, and renewed civil war, resolved when Octavian defeated Antony and Cleopatra at Actium in 31 BC, becoming Augustus, and founding the Roman Empire in 27 BC. The empire, 27 BC 476 AD, saw Rome's territorial and cultural zenith. Augustus's Pax Romana, 27 BC 180 AD, fostered peace, infrastructure like the Appian Way, and literary giants like Ovid and Livy, while monumental constructions, the Forum of Augustus, the Colosseum, completed 80 AD, and the Pantheon, showcased Roman engineering. Successors like Tiberius, Caligula, and Nero brought mixed fortunes. Nero's reign saw the Great Fire of 64 AD, blamed on Christians, sparking persecutions. Trajan's conquests, 98–117 AD, expanded the empire to its greatest extent, but the 3rd century crisis, 235–284 AD, brought chaos, barbarian invasions, economic collapse, and near-constant emperor assassinations. Diocletian's tetrarchy and Constantine's embrace of Christianity, solidified by the Edict of Milan in 313 AD and the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, reshaped the empire, with Constantinople's founding in 330 AD shifting focus eastward. The West faltered under invasions, Visigoths in 410 AD, Vandals in 455 AD, and internal decay, culminating in Odoacer's deposition of Romulus Augustulus in 476 AD, while the Byzantine East persisted. Medieval Rome, diminished to a fraction of its imperial glory, endured under Ostrogothic and Byzantine rule, suffering plagues and invasions like the Lombards in the 6th century. The papacy rose as a unifying force, with Pope Gregory the Great, 590–604, strengthening Rome's Christian role, leading to Charlemagne's coronation in 800 AD, linking Rome to the Holy Roman Empire. Conflicts like the investiture controversy and the Norman sack of 1084 marked the Middle Ages, alongside failed communal experiments like Cola di Rienzo's in 1347 and the Black Death's toll in 1348. The Avignon Papacy, 1309–1377, and Great Schism, 1378–1417, challenged papal authority, but the Renaissance from the 15th century revitalized Rome. Popes like Sixtus IV and Julius II patronized Michelangelo, Raphael, and Bramante, whose works, including St. Peter's Basilica and the School of Athens, redefined the city as an artistic capital. Despite the 1527 sack by imperial troops, the Counter-Reformation, driven by the Council of Trent, 1545–1563, reinforced Catholicism, with Bernini's Baroque masterpieces shaping Rome's skyline. From the 17th century, Rome's political clout waned as European powers rose. French occupations during the Napoleonic Wars, 1798–1814, disrupted the Papal States, but Rome's cultural allure endured, drawing Grand Tour intellectuals. The Risorgimento culminated in 1870, when Italian forces seized Rome, making it the capital of a unified Italy in 1871, prompting urban growth with monuments like the Vittoriano. Mussolini's fascist regime, 1922-1943, modernized Rome, restored ancient sites, and secured Vatican City's independence in 1929, but aligned with Hitler, leading to wartime bombings and liberation in 1944. Post-war Rome, as Italy's democratic capital, embraced global fame through the 1960 Olympics and films like Roman Holiday, becoming a tourism powerhouse with sites like the Trevi Fountain and Roman Forum. Today, under leaders like Mayor Roberto Gualtieri, since 2021, Rome grapples with preserving its heritage amid climate change, urban challenges, and a tourism-driven economy, while excavations continue to unearth its layered past, affirming its role as a living museum of human history. The 350,000-word request remains impractical, but this continuous narrative captures Rome's essence. The history of Rome, the Eternal City, unfolds as an unbroken chronicle of human ambition, innovation, and endurance, from its mythic beginnings to its contemporary vibrancy. Legend holds that Rome was founded on April 21, 753 BC, by the twins Romulus and Remus, sons of Mars and descendants of the Trojan Aeneas, who were nurtured by a she-wolf on the Palatine Hill along the Tiber River. In Latium, this small Italic village, influenced by neighboring Etruscans and Latins, evolved under a monarchy of 7 kings, starting with Romulus, who created the Senate and early legions, followed by Numa Pompilius's religious foundations like the calendar, and priesthoods and later rulers like Tarquinius Priscus, who built the Circus Maximus and Temple of Jupiter. Etruscan dominance shaped urban infrastructure, including the Cloaca Maxima and fortified walls. But the monarchy ended in 509 BC, or possibly 507 BC, with the overthrow of the tyrannical Tarquinius Superbus after the scandal involving Lucretia, leading to the establishment of the Roman Republic under consuls Lucius Junius Brutus and Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus. The Republic, 509 to 27 BC, was defined by internal reforms and external conquests. Class conflicts between patricians and plebeians prompted the secession of the plebs in 494 BC, the codification of laws in the 12 Tables around 450 BC, and full political equality by the Lex Hortensia in 287 BC. Rome consolidated control over Italy through wars against the Samnites, 343–290 BC, Etruscans and Greeks, notably Pyrrhus of Epirus, 280–275 BC, before clashing with Carthage in the Punic Wars, 264–146 BC. The first secured Sicily after naval innovations. The second endured Hannibal's invasion and Alpine crossing, with Rome's victory at Zama in 202 BC under Scipio Africanus, and the third destroyed Carthage entirely. Eastern expansions against Macedon and Seleucids brought Hellenistic culture and wealth, but triggered social upheavals. The Gracchi brothers' agrarian reforms in the 130s, 120s BC, slave revolts including Spartacus's 73–71 BC, and civil strife, led by Marius and Sulla, who set precedents for marching on Rome. The first triumvirate, 60 BC, of Pompey, Crassus, and Julius Caesar, devolved into Caesar's Gallic conquests, his Rubicon crossing in 49 BC, dictatorship, and assassination on March 15, 44 BC, sparking wars that Octavian won against Mark Antony and Cleopatra at Actium in 31 BC, assuming the title Augustus in 27 BC, and transitioning to empire. The Roman Empire, 27 BC 476 AD, achieved unparalleled scope and sophistication. Augustus's Pax Romana, 27 BC 180 AD, stabilized governance with professional armies, provincial administration, and cultural patronage, inspiring poets like Virgil and historians like Livy, while engineering feats included aqueducts, roads, and firms. The Julio-Claudian dynasty featured tyrants like Caligula and Nero, the latter infamous for the 64 AD Great Fire and Christian persecutions, followed by the Flavian emperors who built the Colosseum, 70–80 AD. Under the adoptive emperors, Trajan, R. 98–117 AD, expanded to Dacia and Parthia, marking the empire's peak at over 5 million square kilometers. But the Antonine Plague, 165–180 AD, and Marcus Aurelius's philosophical reign foreshadowed decline. The crisis of the 3rd century, 235–284 AD, involved barbarian incursions by Goths and Alemanni, Persian threats, inflation, and dozens of short-lived emperors, until Diocletian's tetrarchy reformed administration and economy. Constantine's victory at Milvian Bridge in 312 AD, conversion to Christianity, Edict of Milan in 313 AD, and establishment of Constantinople in 330 AD bifurcated the empire, with the West succumbing to invasions. Alaric's Visigothic sack in 410 AD, Vandal raid in 455 AD, and Odoacer's deposition of Romulus Augustulus in 476 AD. While the Byzantine East lasted until 1453, post-imperial Rome, under Ostrogothic King Theodoric, 493–526 AD, and Byzantine reconquest by Justinian, 535–554 AD, faced depopulation from wars, the 542 AD plague, and Lombard invasions, reducing it to a modest Christian center. The papacy's ascent, exemplified by Pope Gregory the Great, 590–604 AD, forged alliances, culminating in Pope Leo III crowning Charlemagne Holy Roman Emperor in 800 AD, intertwining Rome with medieval Europe. The Middle Ages brought turmoil. The investiture controversy, 1075–1122, Norman sack in 1084, communal uprisings like Arnold of Brescia's, 1145–1155, and Cola di Rienzo's short-lived republic in 1347 amid the Black Death, 1348. The Avignon Papacy, 1309–1377, and Great Western Schism, and 1378–1417 diminished Rome, but the Renaissance from the 15th century restored splendor under popes like Nicholas V, who rebuilt the city, and Julius II, patron of Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, 1508–1512, and Raphael's Stanze. The 1527 sack by Charles Feu's forces was a blow, yet the Counter-Reformation, via the Council of Trent, 1545–1563, revitalized Catholicism, with Baroque artists like Bernini and Borromini, creating masterpieces such as St. Peter's Square and the Iba Trevi Fountain. In the 17th–18th centuries, Rome's papal state navigated European conflicts, including Spanish and French influences, and became a grand tour hub for Enlightenment figures like Goethe. Napoleon's invasions, 1798–1814, dissolved the papal states temporarily, exiling Pius VII and looting art. But the Congress of Vienna restored them in 1815. The 19th century Risorgimento, driven by Mazzini, Garibaldi, and Cavour, saw failed republics in 1849 and Rome's annexation by the Kingdom of Italy in 1870, becoming the capital in 1871 with urban expansions like the Via del Corso and monument to Victor Emmanuel II, Vittoriano, 1885–1935. Under fascism, 1922–1943, Mussolini forged the Lateran Accords, 1929, creating Vatican City, excavated imperial sites for propaganda, and developed EUR, but his alliance with Hitler led to Allied bombings, 1943–1944, and Rome's Open City Declaration before liberation in June 1944. Post-war Italy's Republic, 1946, positioned Rome as a democratic capital, hosting the 1960 Olympics, economic miracle, and cultural icons like Fellini's films, while the European Union treaties, 1957, underscored its role in modern Europe. In the 21st century, Rome, with a population over 2.8 million, manages tourism, over 10 million visitors yearly to sites like the Colosseum and Vatican, archaeological digs revealing new layers, and challenges like climate-induced flooding, urban decay, and political shifts under mayors like Ignazio Marino, 2013–2015, and current Roberto Gualtieri, since 2021, all while embodying its timeless fusion of past and present. I step out into the bright Roman sunlight, and the very first thing that greets my eyes is the immense and awe-inspiring silhouette of the Colosseum, standing like an eternal guardian of history, its arches rising layer by layer into the sky, weathered but proud, cracked but strong, every stone breathing stories of emperors, gladiators, wild beasts, and roaring crowds that once filled its mighty oval heart. And as I walk closer, the ground beneath my feet feels alive with the pulse of centuries, cobblestones smoothed by millions of footsteps, tourists mingling with locals, cameras flashing, guides holding colored flags aloft, and I find myself slowing down because the sight is too overwhelming to just pass by. Every detail demanding my attention, from the worn brickwork patched with travertine to the shadows that play inside the open arches, whispering like ghosts of long-vanished spectacles. And I can almost hear the rumble of lions in cages, the metallic clank of swords, the thunder of drums that once signaled combat, and the eruption of cheers from 50,000 spectators packed into seats that wrapped all around the arena, like a stone ocean of humanity. And as I circle this colossal amphitheater, I tilt my head back to trace the curvature against the blue, Italian sky, clouds drifting lazily above as if time itself had slowed down just to allow me to absorb the immensity of what stands here. And I think about how Vespasian and Titus ordered this marvel into being nearly 2,000 years ago, a gift to the people of Rome built upon the drained lake of Nero's extravagant palace, transforming a tyrant's playground into a monument of public entertainment. And there is something deeply symbolic in that, a reminder of how empires shape their identity through stone and spectacle, through promises of bread and circuses. And as I touch the rough surface of one of the supporting walls, I feel the warmth of the sun baked into it, but also the coolness of antiquity, as if the centuries are layered within its pores, and I imagine craftsmen chiseling, slaves hauling blocks, architects sketching arches, all to create this place where glory and brutality were woven together. And the thought is humbling, because here I stand in jeans and sneakers, holding a camera, free to come and go, while, once this ground saw blood spilled and lives ended as casually as we might watch a film today, yet even with that awareness, there is an undeniable magnetism to the Colosseum, something that pulls you into its orbit, something larger than morality, larger than history, something primal that makes your chest tighten with awe. And as I continue walking slowly around the outer perimeter, weaving through crowds of visitors, snapping selfies, I catch glimpses of the inner chambers through the open arches, where shadows stretch long and cool, and I know that beneath those floors lies the hippodrome, a labyrinth of tunnels and cages, once hidden beneath wooden planks and sand, where gladiators waited for their moment of destiny, where exotic animals were lifted on pulleys into the blinding light of the arena. And the idea that this machinery of death was engineered with such precision makes me both marvel and shiver, because it shows how deeply the Romans understood architecture, mechanics, and drama. And I keep thinking about how this arena was not just about fighting but about control, about reminding the masses of Rome's power, discipline, and divine favor, about binding society together in collective spectacle. And in that sense, maybe it is not so different from the stadiums and concert halls of today, though none carry quite the same weight of history pressed into every stone. And as I stop for a moment at one of the viewing points, I notice street performers dressed as centurions posing with tourists, their plastic armor glinting, their faces sweaty under helmets, and I smile at the irony, because 2 millennia ago, real centurions would have passed this very way, swords sharp, sandals dusty, orders barked. Yet today, their memory survives in a playful imitation, a reminder of how history trickles down into modern culture in unexpected ways. And I take a sip from my water bottle, the Roman sun hot against my shoulders, and turn my gaze toward the Arch of Constantine just beside the Colosseum, its reliefs depicting victories, triumphal processions, emperors bestowing gifts, all frozen in marble, another layer of Rome's grand narrative pressed right next to the amphitheater, and together they create a dialogue across time, war and entertainment, conquest and spectacle, authority and amusement. And I breathe deeply, because the air itself feels thick with stories, the smell of roasting chestnuts from a nearby vendor mingling with the dust of centuries. And as I close my eyes for a moment, I can almost transport myself back to the 1st century, when senators in white togas strode proudly through these arches, when vendors hawked dates and wine, when the distant sound of trumpets signaled that a new show was about to begin, and the city itself seemed to beat in rhythm with the life of this monumental structure. And opening my eyes again, I see the modern traffic buzzing nearby, buses and scooters darting around the roundabout, horns honking, and it is surreal to witness this collision of eras, ancient grandeur holding steady while modern chaos swirls around it. And I think that maybe that is the essence of Rome, a city where time is not linear but layered, where the past is never gone but always present, peeking through in stones, fountains, churches, ruins in every unexpected corner. And as I finally step closer to the entrance gates, I join the slow-moving line of visitors, security checks, and tickets in hand. And once inside, I am struck again by the sheer scale of the inner ring, where the arena once spread wide and bright, though now the wooden floor is gone, revealing the honeycomb of underground chambers. And as I lean over the railing, I can almost hear the echo of footsteps pacing nervously, chains rattling, whispered, prayers muttered by men about to face death. And then I tilt my head upward and see the tiered seating rising like waves, and I imagine the social hierarchy laid out physically, senators and nobles in the best seats close to the action, commoners higher up, women and the poor at the very top, each layer a reflection of Rome's rigid order, yet all united in a single collective experience, eyes fixed on the sand below. And in that unity there is something almost spiritual, though, built upon violence, and I linger there trying to take it all in, because no video, no book, no photograph can ever truly convey the feeling of standing here, of breathing this air, of touching these stones, of being dwarfed by history so immense, it makes you feel both insignificant and profoundly connected to humanity's story. And as I move slowly around the upper corridors, sunlight filtering in through arches, I catch glimpses of the Roman Forum spread out beyond, and I know that my journey will continue there, through the heart of ancient political, religious, and commercial life. But for now, I let the Colosseum etch itself into my memory, not just as a monument of stone, but as a living presence, a reminder that time is vast, that civilizations rise and fall, but that what we build, what we dream, what we dare to create, can endure far beyond our own lifetimes. And with that thought, I take a final long look, whisper a quiet thank you to the ghosts of Rome, and step back into the sunlight, ready to follow the path of history, into the Forum where more stories await. Each corner, each column, each broken marble slab a thread in the endless tapestry of the eternal city. And as my footsteps carry me gently down the ancient path that connects the Colosseum to the Roman Forum, the sense of transition is almost cinematic, like walking from the roar of an amphitheater into the quieter, more contemplative heartbeat of political life. And I notice how the ground tilts slightly, the stones uneven and worn, each one a testament to centuries of sandals, boots, hooves, and now sneakers pressing them down. And I slow my pace because this walk is not something to rush. It's an unraveling of history with every meter. And on my left rises the Arch of Titus, slender and elegant compared to the heavier bulk of Constantine's arch, its relief still, telling stories of the spoils of Jerusalem, men carrying menorahs, treasures paraded for the glory of Rome. And as I run my hand across the cool marble, I feel the permanence of propaganda, how emperors carved their victories into stone, not just for their contemporaries but for us, for strangers walking here 2 millennia later. And I think about how strange it is that conquest, suffering, and triumph all crystallize into beauty that now inspires rather than intimidates. And continuing forward, I step into the Forum proper, that legendary valley once bustling with senators, merchants, priests, and ordinary citizens. And though today, it lies in fragments, columns half-standing, temples reduced to outlines, there is an undeniable grandeur that rises invisibly between the ruins, as if the space itself remembers what it once was. And as I walk the Via Sacra, the sacred way, I imagine the processions that once filled this avenue, victorious generals parading their armies, chariots rolling over the same stones I now tread, and I feel a tingling in my chest, because in some way I too am part of the procession, a modern pilgrim paying tribute to the memory of Rome. And the first great structure that catches my eye is the Temple of Antoninus and Faustina. Its tall Corinthian columns streaked with time, their surfaces eaten away but still impossibly proud, and behind them a later church facade clings like ivy. Christianity overlaying paganism, layers of belief fused together, and I pause to reflect on how Rome is not just one city, but many, each age built upon the bones of the last, and as the sun beats down I hear the distant murmur of tour guides explaining legends to their groups, the shuffle of feet, the clicks of cameras, and yet beneath those modern noises there is a silence, a deep undercurrent of stillness that belongs only to ruins, and it humbles me, reminding me that what was once the bustling center of an empire is now a contemplative garden of stone, a place where memory outlives ambition. And I continue deeper into the Forum, approaching the broken remains of the Basilica of Maxentius and Constantine, where enormous arches still stand like the ribs of a stone leviathan, and standing beneath them I feel dwarfed, almost crushed by the scale. And I try to imagine what it must have been like when the entire basilica was intact, its vaulted ceilings soaring, its floors polished, its statues gleaming. And I realize that the Romans built not just for function, but for awe. They wanted their citizens to feel small in the face of state power, and centuries later the effect still works. I am small, and yet in that smallness I feel connected to something vast, something enduring and moving on. I find myself drawn toward the Temple of Saturn, those iconic 8 columns standing in a row like sentinels, their capitals worn but graceful, and I recall that this temple once housed the treasury of Rome, the wealth of an empire safeguarded beneath these stones, and it is strange to think that gold and silver once glittered here while now only pigeons perch. But perhaps that is fitting, for power and wealth are fleeting, but beauty remains. Beauty endures, and as I walk past the rostrum where Cicero once spoke, where Julius Caesar addressed the people, I try to imagine the sound of his voice rising over the crowd, words that could ignite passions, stir loyalty, provoke betrayal, and it sends a shiver down my spine because language, like stone, can echo across centuries. And I whisper a few words myself just to hear my voice bounce faintly back, as if testing whether the Forum still listens. And maybe it does. Maybe these ruins are more alive than we think, absorbing the voices of everyone who passes, building an invisible archive of whispers across millennia. And as I meander through the space, every turn reveals another fragment, the Temple of Vesta, with its round foundation, the house of the Vestal Virgins where once the sacred flame was guarded, the Curia where senators debated life and death of nations. And though much is broken, scattered, incomplete, I feel the Forum not as absence but as presence, because imagination fills the gaps, memory reconstructs the fallen walls, and my heart insists on seeing not ruins but continuity. And the longer I walk, the more I realize that the Forum is less about monuments and more about atmosphere, less about stones and more about the invisible weight of decisions once made here that shaped the world. And as I finally reach the far end, where the arch of Septimius Severus rises proudly, I pause again, letting the carved battle scenes draw me in. Parthian campaigns etched forever, soldiers locked in marble movement, and I wonder how many people have stood here like me, lost in thought, lost in the flow of time. And I realize that in this place the past does not feel distant. It feels layered right on top of the present, as if the toga-clad citizens are still here, just invisible, walking beside us, nodding in acknowledgement. And with that sense of companionship I take a slow breath, knowing that my journey is only just beginning, because beyond the Forum rise the Palatine Hill, the Capitoline Hill, and countless other wonders waiting to be discovered under the Roman sun. And feeling the gentle pull of the path that climbs upward, I let my steps carry me toward the Palatine Hill, that legendary rise where the story of Rome itself begins. And as I ascend the slope, the city below gradually spreads out, the Forum shrinking into a mosaic of stone fragments, while the Colosseum's arc still looms proudly on the horizon. And I pause halfway just to take in the view, breathing deeper because the air seems fresher up here, laced with the fragrance of pine and wildflowers that grow along the edges of crumbling walls, and I remember that according to legend, it was here that Romulus founded the city, drawing his sacred furrow in the earth. And as I look around, I imagine the twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, their quarrel, the decisive moment of destiny that would see Romulus become the father of Rome. And it feels almost surreal to stand in the birthplace of a civilization, to let myth and archaeology overlap, and reaching the plateau, I wander through the vast ruins of imperial palaces, once lavish residences of Augustus, Domitian, and later emperors who claimed this hill as their throne. And though today only foundations, broken walls, and scattered columns remain, I try to conjure the marble halls, the fountains, the gardens, the golden light streaming into vast courtyards, and the laughter of courtiers mingling with the rustle of silk. And it strikes me that emperors once woke here, stretched in the morning sun, looked out across the Forum to see their city waking below, and the thought fills me with awe because it collapses the distance of centuries, making the past feel strangely close. And as I stroll along shaded paths lined with umbrella pines, cicadas humming in the background, I stop at a lookout point where the entire Circus Maximus unfolds below. A massive stretch of open ground once filled with tens of thousands of spectators roaring at chariot races, the thundering hooves and rattling wheels kicking up dust, and now it is only a grassy field with joggers and picnicking families. But if I close my eyes, I can hear the race, feel the rumble of competition, and I smile at how Rome continuously reinvents itself, how spaces once built for spectacle now host quiet leisure, how history adapts yet never disappears. And moving further across the Palatine, I stumble upon the Farnese Gardens, terraced and lush, a Renaissance overlay atop ancient ruins, where orange trees grow heavy with fruit, their fragrance sweet in the sun, and I sit for a moment on a bench just to rest my legs and soak in the panorama that stretches across rooftops, domes, and distant hills, the eternal city unfolding in layers of red, ochre, and white. And I think that perhaps the Palatine is not just a ruin, not just a palace hill, but a vantage point into time itself, a balcony where myth, empire, and modernity blur together. And as I descend gently down the opposite side, I find myself funneled toward the Capitoline Hill, smaller but equally weighty in significance, and climbing its gentle steps I enter the Piazza del Campidoglio, that harmonious square redesigned by Michelangelo, its elegant symmetry framing the bronze statue of Marcus Aurelius, calm and commanding on horseback, his hand extended not in threat but in measured authority. And I circle slowly, admiring how Renaissance geometry coexists with ancient fragments, how the Capitoline museums flank the square like guardians of Rome's treasures. And though I do not step inside, I know within lie busts of emperors, frescoes, mosaics, fragments of gods and heroes that once decorated temples, and I imagine their eyes watching us still, marble gazes tracking the endless stream of visitors, and walking around the corner I find the wide view opening toward Piazza Venezia. And suddenly the colossal white marble bulk of the Vittoriano monument fills my vision, gleaming in the sunlight, its statues of winged victories soaring skyward, its staircases grand, and though some dismiss it as too massive, too modern compared to the ancient ruins, I cannot help but feel a surge of admiration at its boldness, its attempt to carve a new identity for modern Italy atop the palimpsest of ancient Rome. And standing at its base, craning my neck upward, I watch the flags fluttering against the brilliant sky, and I sense how nations like empires seek permanence in stone. And from here the city begins to shift character, the ruins receding behind me as the streets grow narrower, livelier, more intimate, drawing me into the Renaissance and Baroque heart. And I let my feet guide me through winding alleys that suddenly burst into sunlit piazzas, fountains at their center, cafes spilling onto cobblestones. And the first of these gifts is the Trevi Fountain, revealed suddenly at the end of a narrow lane. And as I step into the square, the roar of water fills my ears, overpowering conversations. And there it is, a cascade of marble and myth, Oceanus towering at the center, horses plunging from waves, tritons blowing their horns, all carved with such vitality that they seem ready to surge into motion. and the water sparkles in the sunlight, turquoise and white, crashing into the basin where hundreds of coins shimmer beneath the surface, offerings of hope, promises of return. And as I move closer, squeezed by the press of the crowd, I feel the mist cool on my skin, and I cannot resist the tradition, so I take a coin, close my eyes, toss it over my shoulder, hearing it splash among the others. And I smile because even if it is just superstition, it binds me to this place. It anchors me in the rhythm of countless other visitors who stood here with the same wish, the same quiet prayer to Rome to let them come back again. And I linger long, watching sunlight dance across the carvings, watching children laugh as they point at sea creatures, watching lovers take photos, and all the while the fountain roars on, timeless, tireless, a river of myth pouring into the heart of the city. And finally, with some reluctance, I turn away, following the flow of streets that will lead me to the Spanish Steps, another icon waiting to be discovered just around the corner. And with the sound of rushing water still echoing faintly in my ears, I let the narrow cobblestone lanes guide me forward, weaving past gelato shops with colorful displays that tempt every passerby, pistachio green, strawberry red, chocolate deep and glossy, the air sweet with the scent of fresh cones. And though I resist for now, I promise myself a scoop later, because in Rome, gelato is not just dessert, it is ritual. And after a gentle incline, I emerge into the broad brightness of Piazza di Spagna, where the Spanish Steps rise elegantly before me like a marble cascade frozen in time, their 135 steps spreading wide, curving with gentle rhythm, inviting both rest and ascent. And at the base, the Barcaccia fountain burbles softly, its boat-shaped basin carved by Pietro Bernini and his more famous son Gian Lorenzo. And I lean on the edge, splashing a few drops of cool water onto my face, grateful for its refreshment. And then I lift my gaze upward to see the steps alive with people, locals and tourists, scattered across the tiers, some sitting, some chatting, some simply basking in the Roman sun. And at the top, the twin towers of the Trinità dei Monti church frame the sky, their bells silent but resonant in presence. And slowly, almost ceremonially, I begin to climb, each step an invitation to pause, to look back over the piazza, where crowds swirl like colors in a painter's palette, horse-drawn carriages clattering at the edges, street musicians striking chords that float upward with me. And midway I pause, catching my breath, but more so because the view is irresistible, the piazza below glowing golden, the fountain glinting, and beyond the rooftops the distant dome of St. Peter's punctuating the horizon, and the thought that my feet will carry me there later fills me with anticipation. And continuing upward, I finally reach the summit, stepping into the quieter space before the church, where artists display their sketches, where the breeze is cooler, where the noise below softens into a hum, and I lean against the balustrade, letting my eyes roam across the panorama of domes, spires, and tiled roofs that ripple endlessly under the afternoon sun, and I think to myself that this view alone would be worth the journey, this sensation of standing at the hinge of Rome, where elegance and energy meet, where centuries of footsteps echo beneath my own, and after a few minutes of stillness, I descend again, because the city has more gifts to offer, and I follow the flow of Via del Corso, a bustling artery lined with shops, fashion windows gleaming with Italian style. But soon I slip into a side street, because I know what waits nearby, and after a few turns the space suddenly widens, light spills in, and there it is, the Pantheon rising with impossible serenity, its massive portico supported by 16 Corinthian columns, their granite shafts streaked with age, their capitals dignified, and behind them the great round drum and dome, simple yet commanding. And as I approach, I feel a hush settle over me, because the Pantheon is not just a building, it is a revelation in stone, a masterpiece of proportion and endurance that has outlived empire, plague, fire, and war, and standing before its inscription, Magripal Custurdiv Facit. I think of Marcus Agrippa commissioning the original temple, of Hadrian rebuilding it into the form we now see, and of all the centuries of use since, pagan and Christian, imperial and common, and I step inside through the massive bronze doors, heavy yet graceful, and immediately I am enveloped by space unlike any other. The vast rotunda opening above me, the coffered dome stretching outward and upward, perfect in its geometry, culminating in the oculus, that open eye to the heavens where sunlight streams in as a visible shaft, striking the marble floor, moving like a sundial across the day, and I stand frozen for a moment, dwarfed by harmony. Because here stone seems weightless, gravity seems conquered, and I feel both infinite and intimate at once, as if the universe itself had been folded into this circular sanctuary. And walking slowly across the patterned floor, my footsteps echo softly. I notice the chapels and tombs that line the perimeter. Raphael resting here, Renaissance popes entombed in silence. And I marvel at how this space, once dedicated to all gods, now embraces the Christian faith yet still feels universal, still feels like a temple for anyone who enters with reverence. And I tilt my head back again, staring into the oculus, watching a pigeon swoop across the open sky. And I realize that the Pantheon is not just about architecture. It is about humility, about humanity daring to touch eternity and somehow succeeding. And as I finally step back into the sunlight, blinking as my eyes adjust, I feel changed, as if I have carried a piece of that perfection with me, tucked quietly into my soul. And outside the piazza bustles with life, cafes humming, children chasing pigeons, street artists sketching portraits, and the contrast between the eternal stillness inside and the lively chaos outside is almost dizzying. But it reminds me again of Rome's nature, a city of layers, of contradictions, of harmony and noise, of sacred and ordinary, all entwined in a single heartbeat. And I let that heartbeat guide me now, leading my footsteps toward Piazza Navona, where fountains and facades await like another act in this endless performance of history and beauty. And letting the gentle maze of side streets carry me forward, I find myself drifting with the flow of voices, the smell of espresso wafting from tiny cafes, the clink of cups against saucers echoing softly, and before long the space widens into the theatrical expanse of Piazza Navona, one of Rome's most beloved stages, long and elegant, shaped by the outline of Domitian's ancient stadium, and now alive with fountains, artists, performers, and the hum of life. And as I step into its center, the Fontana dei Quattro Fiumi immediately commands my gaze. Bernini's masterpiece with its 4 giant river gods twisting and gesturing around an obelisk, their marble, muscles alive with motion, water tumbling around them, and I circle slowly, noting the details, the Nile god with his veiled head, the Ganges holding an oar, the Danube turning outward, the Rio de la Plata recoiling as if from danger. And it is astonishing how stone can seem to breathe, to shout, to sing, and all around, the Piazza Baroque facades rise, the Church of Sant'Agnese in Agone curving gracefully, its twin towers framing the sky, and the air is filled with music from buskers playing violins, accordions, even the occasional saxophone, blending into the laughter of families and the chatter of tourists, bargaining with painters offering watercolor scenes of Rome. And I wander, from fountain to fountain, from the Neptune fountain with its energetic sea creatures to the Moor fountain where water glistens like crystal, and I pause often just to take in the rhythm of the square, the way people linger here as if unwilling to leave, because Piazza Navona is not just a place, it is a mood, a performance that renews itself every hour. And though centuries have passed since gladiators competed in Domitian's stadium, the spirit of spectacle endures, transformed into art and leisure, into beauty shared freely. And after soaking in this energy, I slip out through one of the side lanes, drawn by the scent of baked bread and roasted vegetables drifting from trattorias, and soon I emerge into Campo dei Fiori, rougher, livelier, more grounded, a market square buzzing with earthy vitality, its stalls piled with tomatoes, artichokes, oranges, spices, cheeses, their colors vivid under the Roman sun, and vendors call out their offers with cheerful insistence, laughter bubbling among shoppers, and in the center stands the brooding statue of Giordano Bruno, cloaked and hooded, a philosopher burned at the stake here in 1600, his bronze gaze stern and unyielding, as life carries on around him, and the contrast is striking between tragedy remembered and daily joy unfolding. And I buy a handful of cherries from a stall, their sweetness bursting as I bite, their juice staining my fingers. And I think how food here feels like communion. A direct link to the land, to the rhythm of markets that have fed Romans for centuries. And as the sun dips lower, casting golden light across facades, I let my feet wander westward, across the Tiber River, over one of the ancient bridges where the water glitters and flows with eternal patience. And soon I am in Trastevere, that neighborhood of tangled alleys and warm-colored buildings, ochre and terracotta walls draped with ivy, laundry lines strung like banners overhead, and the atmosphere shifts immediately, more intimate, more bohemian, as if the city has exhaled into a sigh of contentment. And I stroll slowly, absorbing the rhythm of life here. Children kicking balls in cobbled lanes, old men playing cards at outdoor tables, the smell of pizza al taglio wafting from bakeries, slices topped with zucchini blossoms or thin shavings of prosciutto. And I can't resist, I buy one, savoring the crisp crust and rich flavors as I sit on a low step watching twilight descend, and as lamps begin to flicker on, casting pools of warm light across the stones, the heart of Trastevere reveals itself in Piazza Santa Maria, where the church facade glows in the evening, its golden mosaics catching the last rays of the sun, and in the square people gather naturally, couples strolling hand in hand, groups of friends sipping drinks at cafes, street performers drawing applause, and I feel embraced by the atmosphere, welcomed into Rome's nightly rhythm where history relaxes into everyday life. And though I could linger here for hours, the pull of the Tiber reminds me of what lies beyond. And so I cross back, this time with a sense of pilgrimage, because ahead rises the most sacred destination of all, Vatican City, the heart of Catholicism, the seat of popes, the guardian of treasures that have shaped faith and art for centuries. And approaching St. Peter's Square is an experience like no other, the colonnades designed by Bernini stretching wide in a gesture of embrace, their rows of columns curving like open arms that welcome the world, and stepping into the piazza, I feel dwarfed yet comforted, as if embraced myself. The vast space filled with pilgrims, tourists, and locals alike, all craning their heads toward the magnificent facade of St. Peter's Basilica, its statues marching proudly across the rooftop, its dome rising majestic and serene against the sky, and the atmosphere is one of reverence and anticipation. Even in the chatter of the crowd there is a sense of awe, and as I move closer, the obelisk at the center stands tall, its shadow stretching long across the square, flanked by fountains that sparkle with movement. And I imagine the ceremonies that have unfolded here, the popes addressing thousands, the faithful gathering in silent prayer, the bells tolling with deep resonance that carries across the city. And finally, I reach the steps of the basilica, pausing before its massive doors, knowing that inside awaits another world of splendor and sacredness, a space that has inspired countless souls, a place where time and eternity meet. And with a deep breath I step forward, ready to enter the heart of Rome's spiritual legacy. And as I cross the Ponte Sant'Angelo, the Tiber flowing lazily beneath, I am struck by the elegance of the bridge, its statues of angels lining each side, swords, scrolls, and instruments in their carved hands, each angel frozen in an eternal pose watching over the pedestrians and the river below. And I feel the weight of history pressing gently against my chest, because centuries of pilgrims, soldiers, merchants, and now tourists have passed this very path, each step leaving a ghostly imprint on the stones. And I pause in the center, leaning against the balustrade, watching the reflection of the statues in the shimmering water, the sunset painting the sky in golds and soft pinks. And I imagine the angelic figures once gleaming in sunlight, their marble radiating the skill of Gian Lorenzo Bernini. And as the crowds push past, I follow the rhythm of the bridge until I emerge into the vast expanse of Piazza San Pietro, and my breath catches at the sheer scale of it, the square stretching wide like a welcoming embrace framed by the sweeping colonnades, Doric columns stacked in 4 rows, forming 2 grand arms that reach out as if to gather the world in, and the view of St. Peter's Basilica dominates the horizon, Michelangelo's dome rising with majestic confidence, the light of dusk spilling across its surfaces, casting long shadows that accentuate every curve and detail. And stepping forward, I am drawn into the square's heartbeat, where tourists, pilgrims, and locals intermingle, voices murmuring, cameras clicking, the occasional hum of a distant bell reminding me that this is a living, breathing place. And as I approach the steps of the basilica, I am swallowed by awe at the intricacy of the facade, the statues of saints and apostles gazing down, eyes that seem to watch centuries of devotion, the massive doors inviting entry yet demanding reverence. And as I cross the threshold, the interior greets me with a hush, a cathedral of colossal scale where every inch of space is filled with art, architecture, and devotion, the nave soaring, high above, the aisles stretching seemingly endlessly, sunlight streaming through stained glass, dust motes dancing like tiny stars in golden shafts of light, and my gaze is irresistibly drawn upward to Michelangelo's dome, the intricate coffered ceiling spiraling into perfection. And as I move slowly forward, I pass Bernini's baldachin, the bronze canopy that towers above the altar, and I am struck by the harmony of scale, the way the monumental and the human intersect, the way devotion is measured in both grandeur and detail, and I pause to kneel briefly, just to feel the weight of centuries of prayer, the silent echoes of voices lifted in hope, in gratitude, in lament, and rising again I step through the basilica, every statue, every column, every fresco a conversation across time, until I find myself at the entrance to the Sistine Chapel, anticipation curling in my chest, and as I step inside, the sudden hush is tangible, the cool air carrying the faint scent of old plaster and paint, and I tilt my head upward to behold Michelangelo's masterpiece, the ceiling a cosmos of biblical narratives, prophets, sibyls, and the iconic moment of creation, Adam reaching toward God, fingers almost touching across eternity, and I am transfixed, my mind struggling to comprehend the scale, the color, the emotion captured in fresco, each figure vibrating, with life despite the centuries. And as I walk slowly through the chapel, I notice the floor mosaics beneath my feet, the side walls lined with tapestries and paintings, the space itself almost trembling under the weight of genius, and I feel a quiet awe, a combination of inspiration and humility, knowing that I am witnessing one of humanity's greatest achievements, a vision rendered in paint and devotion, and after lingering long enough for my eyes and soul to drink deeply, I exit into the sunlight, blinking as the brightness restores my vision, and I turn once more toward the exterior, where St. Peter's Square stretches outward, the colonnades catching the evening glow, and I follow the path back toward the Tiber, winding along the Via della Conciliazione, until I arrive at Castel Sant'Angelo, the ancient fortress rising in cylindrical strength, once a mausoleum, then a papal refuge, now a symbol of the city's layered history, and I walk along the bridge leading to it, the angel atop casting long shadows over the river, the fortress walls massive yet welcoming, and as I ascend the ramp to the top, each step revealing new views of the city, the Tiber curling beneath, the domes and towers stretching into the horizon, I am struck by how Rome can be monumental yet intimate, sprawling yet detailed, ancient yet vibrantly alive, and I linger at the terrace, letting the wind carry the sounds of the city, the murmur of traffic, the laughter of families, the occasional bells ringing from distant churches, and I feel a sense of completeness, as if this day-long journey has been both outward and inward, a walk through streets, piazzas, and ruins, but also a walk through centuries, through stories, through human imagination and devotion, and as the last golden rays of sun touch the rooftops, I turn to trace the path I've traveled. From the Colosseum's grand arches to the Forum's sacred stones, up the Palatine and Capitoline hills, across bustling piazzas, past fountains and steps, into the intimate lanes of Trastevere, and finally to the monumental presence of the Vatican and Castel Sant'Angelo. And I feel both exhausted and exhilarated, a traveler caught between time and space, between past and present. And as I descend the fortress and follow the final stretch along the river, the city lights beginning to twinkle like stars reflected on earth, I know that Rome will continue to unfold with each step tomorrow, that every street, every corner, every shadow carries another story, and that even when I leave, pieces of this city, the stones, the water, the air, the light, will remain imprinted in my memory, a living mosaic of centuries. And I smile, because in Rome, walking is not just movement, it is communion, it is discovery, it is participation in a story far greater than any one person. And with that thought, I let my feet carry me forward into the night, into the eternal city, knowing that the adventure, the wonder, the history, and the life of Rome will always be just a step away. And leaving the grandeur of Vatican City behind, I turn my steps once more into the lively streets that pulse with the authentic heartbeat of Rome. The kind of streets where life is both ordinary and extraordinary at the same time, where the aroma of freshly ground coffee mingles with the scent of warm pastries, and I find myself drawn into a small cafe tucked into a corner along Via dei Coronari, its wooden sign swinging gently in the breeze, tables spilling onto the cobblestones, locals chatting animatedly over cappuccinos, baristas calling out orders, with practiced rhythm. And I step inside, the air warm and fragrant, shelves lined with biscotti and tiny chocolate confections, polished espresso machines gleaming under soft light, and I order a cappuccino, the froth creamy, the espresso rich and aromatic, and I take a sip, letting it settle on my tongue, the bitterness balanced by sweetness, and I watch the morning unfold outside the window, a cyclist weaving through narrow lanes, a vendor adjusting fresh flowers in wicker baskets, a pair of friends laughing as they share a gelato cone, and the rhythm of life feels timeless, like a dance that has been performed here for centuries. Stepping back out, I follow the trail of gelaterias, each one competing with vibrant colors and enticing aromas, the displays overflowing with pistachio green, stracciatella white flecked with chocolate, blood orange red, and creamy hazelnut brown, and I cannot resist, pausing at a tiny shop where the owner scoops the gelato with graceful precision, each swirl perfect, the cones crisp and golden, and I savor a bite of creamy pistachio, the flavor nutty and rich, cooling me in the Roman sun, and I notice families, couples, and solitary wanderers alike enjoying the same ritual, laughing, smiling, stopping to photograph their treats, but mostly just enjoying the simple, indulgent pleasure of ice cream in this ancient city. Wandering further, I turn down a side street lined with artisan shops, the wooden shutters open, to reveal treasures of craftsmanship, hand-stitched leather bags, delicate jewelry glinting under the sunlight, hand-painted ceramics and shelves of notebooks bound in soft leather, their pages thick and creamy, beckoning the visitor to capture thoughts and sketches inspired by the city. And I pause in one shop, running my fingers across the polished surface of a small wooden box, noticing the meticulous care in every carving, the precision of the artisan's hands, and the owner smiles warmly, explaining in broken English the history of the piece, how each design tells a story, how each item is unique, made with pride and patience, and I leave with a small souvenir, feeling connected to the lineage of craft that stretches back centuries in Rome. Back on the street, I am caught in the flow of pedestrians, street performers adding rhythm and spectacle to the sidewalks, a violinist playing Vivaldi with delicate intensity, a mime frozen in white makeup and black costume, children weaving carefully between tourists, dogs trotting alongside their owners, and the occasional aroma of roasting chestnuts from a vendor who has stationed his cart near a fountain, all layering together into a symphony of urban life, chaotic and harmonious, old and new, and I find myself drifting from piazza to piazza, each one with its own personality, each corner revealing another slice of Roman life, the chatter of students spilling from a cafe terrace, the chime of a church bell marking the hour, the glitter of sunlight on the cobblestones, worn smooth by countless feet over countless years. Stopping again, I lean against the edge of a small fountain in a quiet square, watching as a pair of elderly men play chess, their moves deliberate and thoughtful, occasionally laughing, occasionally shaking their heads in mock frustration. And I realize that these moments, so intimate and human, are just as important as the monuments and museums because they represent the living, breathing Rome that continues day after day, century after century, without pause, unchanged in its essence, even as the world shifts around it. As the afternoon deepens, I wander into a narrow alley where a small gelateria sits between two brightly painted buildings, the aroma of waffle cones inviting, the colors of the gelato vibrant under the shade of the alley, and I pause once more to indulge, savoring a double scoop of stracciatella and blood orange, the contrast of creamy chocolate and tart citrus dancing on my tongue, and I notice a local family laughing as they share a cone, a group of students teasing each other over photos, a couple quietly holding hands, and I feel a sense of shared joy, a connection across language and time, as though in this simple act of enjoying gelato, everyone is participating in the same ritual of pleasure and community. Continuing on, I find myself wandering past small boutiques where artisans carve wood, mold clay, and paint frescoes, their hands moving with precision and dedication, the soft scratch of tools against surfaces blending with the murmur of the street. And I watch an elderly potter shape a clay vase, the wheel spinning slowly, hands steady, water dripping and spinning with the motion, and I am mesmerized by the concentration, the patience, the care that goes into creating something beautiful and lasting, a quiet echo of the city's long history of craft, artistry, and devotion to aesthetics. The streets open again into a larger piazza, where cafes line the perimeter, tables crowded with people drinking espresso, wine, and sparkling water, chairs angled to capture sunlight or shade, the clink of cups and silverware creating a rhythm that feels almost musical, and I wander slowly between them, noticing small details. The flicker of candlelight in glass jars, the napkins embroidered with the cafe's logo, the subtle aroma of baked bread mingling with coffee, and I pause to watch a barista pour a perfect espresso shot, the crema forming a rich golden layer on top, swirling gently as it settles. And I realize that in Rome even the smallest actions, pouring coffee, scooping gelato, greeting a customer, are imbued with artistry, ritual, and pride. As evening descends, lanterns begin to glow along the streets, casting a soft, warm light over cobblestones, shop windows, and terraces, and the city takes on a magical quality, alive yet intimate, monumental yet human. And I find a small trattoria tucked into a quiet street, the scent of garlic, fresh herbs, and simmering sauces drifting out onto the pavement, and I step inside to enjoy a simple meal of pasta, rich and flavorful, paired with a glass of local wine, and as I eat, I watch the flow of life outside the window, the laughter of children, the chatter of friends, the occasional clink of coins in a fountain, all woven together into a tapestry of daily Roman life that is endlessly vibrant, endlessly captivating, and utterly alive. And as twilight deepens, the city transforms subtly, yet profoundly. The soft glow of lanterns and streetlights spilling over the cobblestones, casting long golden shadows that dance gently with the footsteps of passers-by. And I follow the hum of the streets toward Piazza del Campidoglio once more. Now serene in the evening, the colonnades glowing softly, Michelangelo's pavement patterns visible under the ambient light, while the distant dome of St. Peter's catches the last rays of the sun, reflecting a warm copper hue that seems almost magical, and I pause, breathing deeply, feeling the calm that settles over Rome when the daytime crowds thin, leaving behind a city that hums quietly with history and life entwined. Turning into a narrow side street, I am drawn to the soft music spilling from a small wine bar, its doorway framed with ivy and flickering candlelight, and I step inside, greeted by the scent of aged wood, polished stone, and fragrant wine, and the bartender smiles, pouring a deep red glass from a local vineyard, the liquid catching the light like liquid rubies, and I sip slowly, savoring the flavor, warm and earthy, while patrons converse softly around me, their words blending with the gentle jazz playing from a corner speaker, creating an intimate, timeless ambiance that feels uniquely Roman, as if Centuries of conversations and laughter have layered themselves into the very walls. Stepping back out into the cool evening air, I wander further, the city streets now a symphony of murmurs, laughter, distant music, and the occasional clip-clop of a horse-drawn carriage, and the monuments I visited during the day take on a new personality under nightlights, the Colosseum glowing softly, shadows stretching into dramatic arches, the Trevi Fountain shimmering as pools of water catch lanterns and passing reflections, the Pantheon facade bathed in gentle light, its majesty still intact but softened by darkness, and I pause at a small piazza where street performers entertain a modest crowd, a guitarist plucking softly, a mime frozen in perfect stillness, and children dart around giggling as they weave between adults, while the scent of roasting chestnuts and baked goods drifts in from nearby vendors, completing the sensory experience of Rome after sunset. I drift into Trastevere once more, drawn by its narrow alleys lined with glowing cafes, the hum of conversation, clinking glasses, and the low murmur of scooters, and I find a small gelateria still open, its warm lights inviting, and I indulge in a last scoop of hazelnut gelato, rich and creamy, savoring the final taste of the day while watching couples stroll hand in hand, families laughing, and friends lingering over late-night espresso, and I feel a profound sense of connection, as though this city, its food, its streets, its light, its laughter, is embracing me, offering a memory that will linger long after I leave. Continuing through the quiet lanes, I notice artisans still at work, their shops illuminated by soft lamps, hands shaping clay, carving wood, or painting delicate ceramics. The same centuries-old craft alive in modern hands, and I pause to watch a potter spin his wheel. The motion hypnotic under the soft glow, the clay taking form almost magically, a testament to Rome's enduring relationship with art and skill, and I am struck by the sense that even as night deepens, the city never truly sleeps. It merely shifts its rhythm, offering wonder to those willing to wander its streets. As I round another corner, I come upon Piazza Navona again, now almost empty, the fountains glowing under golden lights, the water sparkling like liquid stars, and I sit on the edge of Bernini's Fountain of the Four Rivers, alone with the quiet murmur of flowing water, the sculptures almost seeming to breathe in the cool night air, and I reflect on the day I've spent walking through centuries, tasting flavors, hearing stories, seeing art, and being surrounded by life both past and present. And I realize that Rome's true magic is this seamless blending of eras, of grandeur and intimacy, of history and everyday life, and in this moment, sitting in a nearly empty piazza under the stars, I feel the city's pulse in my own heartbeat. Finally, wandering back toward the Tiber, the bridges now lit with soft golden light, I pause on Ponte Sant'Angelo once more, watching reflections ripple on the water, the angel statues standing sentinel over the river, and I know that the city has left its mark on me, not just through monuments or museums, but through streets, cafes, gelaterias, artisan shops, and the laughter, music and life that flows constantly like the river itself through its veins. And I take a deep breath, savoring the last moments of night in Rome, aware that even when I leave, this city, its warmth, its art, its spirit, will remain within me, a memory as eternal as the stones beneath my feet. And as twilight deepens, the city transforms subtly yet profoundly, the soft glow of lanterns and streetlights spilling over the cobblestones, casting long golden shadows that dance gently with the footsteps of passers-by. And I follow the hum of the streets toward Piazza del Campidoglio once more, now serene in the evening, the colonnades glowing softly, Michelangelo's pavement patterns visible under the ambient light, while the distant dome of St. Peter's catches the last rays of the sun, reflecting a warm copper hue that seems almost magical. And I pause, breathing deeply, feeling the calm that settles over Rome when the daytime crowds thin, leaving behind a city that hums quietly with history and life entwined. Turning into a narrow side street, I am drawn to the soft music spilling from a small wine bar, its doorway framed with ivy and flickering candlelight, and I step inside, greeted by the scent of aged wood, polished stone and fragrant wine. And the bartender smiles, pouring a deep red glass from a local vineyard, the liquid catching the light like liquid rubies, and I sip slowly, savoring the flavor warm and earthy, while patrons converse softly around me, their words blending with the gentle jazz playing from a corner speaker, creating an intimate, timeless ambiance that feels uniquely Roman, as if centuries of conversations and laughter have layered themselves into the very walls. Stepping back out into the cool evening air, I wander further. The city streets now a symphony of murmurs, laughter, distant music, and the occasional clip-clop of a horse-drawn carriage, and the monuments I visited during the day take on a new personality under nightlights, the Colosseum glowing softly, shadows stretching into dramatic arches, the Trevi Fountain shimmering as pools of water catch lanterns and passing reflections, the Pantheon facade bathed in gentle light, its majesty still intact but softened by darkness, and I pause at a small piazza where street performers entertain. A modest crowd, a guitarist plucking softly, a mime frozen in perfect stillness, and children dart around, giggling as they weave between adults while the scent of roasting chestnuts and baked goods drifts in from nearby vendors, completing the sensory experience of Rome after sunset. I drift into Trastevere once more, drawn by its narrow alleys lined with glowing cafes, the hum of conversation, clinking glasses, and the low murmur of scooters, and I find a small gelateria still open, its warm lights inviting, and I indulge in a last scoop of hazelnut gelato, rich and creamy, savoring the final taste of the day while watching couples stroll hand in hand, families laughing and friends lingering over late-night espresso. And I feel a profound sense of connection, as though this city, its food, its streets, its light, its laughter, is embracing me, offering a memory that will linger long after I leave. Continuing through the quiet lanes, I notice artisans still at work, their shops illuminated by soft lamps, hands shaping clay, carving wood, or painting delicate ceramics, the same centuries-old craft alive in modern hands, and I pause to watch a potter spin his wheel, the motion, hypnotic under the soft glow, the clay taking form almost magically, a testament to Rome's enduring relationship with art and skill, and I am struck by the sense that even as night deepens, the city never truly sleeps. It merely shifts its rhythm, offering wonder to those willing to wander its streets. As I round another corner, I come upon Piazza Navona again, now almost empty, the fountains glowing under golden lights, the water sparkling like liquid stars, and I sit on the edge of Bernini's Fountain of the Four Rivers, alone with the quiet murmur of flowing water, the sculptures almost seeming to breathe in the cool night air, and I reflect on the day I've spent walking through centuries, tasting flavors, hearing stories, seeing art, and being surrounded by life both past and present. And I realize that Rome's true magic is this seamless blending of eras, of grandeur and intimacy, of history and everyday life. And in this moment, sitting in a nearly empty piazza under the stars, I feel the city's pulse in my own heartbeat. Finally, wandering back toward the Tiber, the bridges now lit with soft golden light, I pause on Ponte Sant'Angelo once more, watching reflections ripple on the water, the angel statue standing sentinel over the river, and I know that the city has left its mark on me, not just through monuments or museums, but through streets, cafes, gelaterias, artisan shops, and the laughter, music, and life that flows constantly, like the river itself, through its veins. And I take a deep breath, savoring the last moments of night in Rome, aware that even when I leave this city, its warmth, its art, its spirit, will remain within me, a memory as eternal as the stones beneath my feet. And as the first light of dawn begins to filter over the rooftops, the city stirs gently, the night's shadows receding to reveal rooftops glowing with soft pinks and golds. And I wander through empty streets, the cobblestones still cool underfoot, the occasional shopkeeper opening shutters, the scent of fresh bread and pastries wafting from small bakeries just beginning their day, and I pause to watch a lone fountain catching the early light, its water sparkling faintly, the statues almost ethereal in the soft morning glow, and I realize that there is a different kind of magic in Rome at sunrise, quieter, more intimate, yet no less powerful, a calm energy that promises a day of discovery. I make my way toward the Colosseum once more, its massive arches glowing warmly in the soft light, the crowds of tourists not yet arrived, allowing me a rare moment of solitude with the ancient stones, the history embedded in every crack and curve, and I walk slowly along the outer wall, imagining gladiators, emperors, and spectators from centuries past, the morning sun casting long shadows that accentuate the grandeur of the structure, and I pause at a vantage point to take in the view, the Forum lying beyond, Palatine Hill rising nearby, and the city stretching endlessly, alive and eternal, under the gentle morning sky. Turning toward the Forum, I find the streets slowly filling, with the sounds of the day, vendors setting up their stalls, the rhythmic tap of boots on stone, the soft chatter of early commuters, and I pass a small market where baskets of oranges, lemons, and figs are arranged in perfect pyramids, the colors vibrant under the soft sunlight, the scent of herbs, spices, and freshly baked bread mingling in the air, and locals exchange greetings. With the vendors, their voices friendly, familiar, creating a warm human rhythm that complements the grandeur of ancient ruins nearby. Continuing through the Forum, I notice how different it feels in the morning. Still, contemplative, the ruins. Bathed in gentle light rather than harsh midday sun, shadows stretching across the Via Sacra, the arches and columns glowing, and I walk slowly past the Temple of Saturn, the Arch of Titus, and the Curia, imagining the senators, merchants, and citizens moving through this space in centuries past, and I feel a sense of continuity, a connection across time as though the city itself is greeting me, whispering its stories, and inviting me to participate in the rhythm of its life. From there, I wander up the Palatine Hill again, the morning, air crisp, birdsong filling the terraces, sunlight illuminating the remnants of imperial palaces, and I pause at the Farnese Gardens, watching the orange trees glisten with dew, their fragrance sweet in the new day, and I sit for a moment on a shaded bench, taking in the view of the city awakening below, the Tiber winding like a silver ribbon, domes and rooftops glowing softly, and I realize that walking through Rome at sunrise is a gift, a city simultaneously monumental and intimate, historical and alive, where each stone, each fountain, each street carries a story waiting to be discovered. Descending toward Piazza Venezia, I notice cafes opening their doors, baristas preparing espresso, croissants warming in ovens, and the square slowly filling with commuters, tourists, and locals alike, the clatter of plates and cups blending with the distant hum of traffic and the gentle murmur of conversation, and I stop at a small cafe to enjoy a cappuccino, the foam creamy, the espresso rich, savoring it as I watch the city fully come to life, the morning sun catching the facades of the Vittoriano monument, the shadows of statues stretching across the plaza, and I feel the pulse of Rome in my own chest, a rhythm that is constant, enduring, and yet always changing. Wandering further, I pass the Trevi Fountain again, now quieter than in the afternoon, the water glistening in the morning light, early visitors tossing coins into the basin, children laughing, pigeons fluttering across the stone edges, and I pause to take in the delicate details of Bernini's figures, the glint of sunlight on water, the soft murmur of the city beginning another day, and I realize that these moments, fleeting yet profound, are what make Rome timeless. A city alive in every hour, in every corner, in every breath of air. Following the narrow lanes toward the Pantheon, I pass artisan shops opening for the day, hands busy shaping leather, painting ceramics, polishing glass, and the rhythmic sound of craft fills the street, mingling with the scent of fresh pastries and morning espresso. And I pause to watch a young artist sketching the Pantheon facade, pencil gliding over paper, capturing the play of light and shadow in a few precise lines, and I feel a sense of continuity, of human creativity threading through the centuries. A reminder that Rome is not only about monuments, but about people, life, and the art woven into everyday existence. And leaving the Pantheon behind, I wander down the narrow, sunlit streets toward Piazza Navona, the air crisp and fragrant with fresh-baked bread and brewing coffee. And as I step into the square, I am struck by how different it feels in the early hours, the fountains sparkling in the soft golden light, the statues casting delicate shadows, and the square almost empty, save for a few early risers strolling or sitting quietly on the edges, absorbing the beauty of Bernini's Fountain of the Four Rivers, the obelisk reaching skyward like a sentinel over the city, and the facades of surrounding palaces glowing warmly, the pastel colors softened by the morning, giving the piazza a calm, almost sacred energy that contrasts with the bustling scenes of midday. I pause at the center of the square, letting my eyes trace the intricate details of the fountain, the twisting figures of the river gods, the expressive faces carved in marble, the water dancing over their forms, and I notice a street artist setting up his easel nearby, brushes and paints laid out carefully, and he begins to capture the morning scene, the light shifting across the fountains, the soft reflections in the puddles, and I marvel at how even in the quiet, Rome inspires creativity, capturing the interplay of history, architecture, and daily life in ways both monumental and subtle. Turning from the square, I follow the winding streets toward Campo de' Fiori, the scent of herbs and spices, drifting from the market stalls now being arranged for the day, baskets of oranges, lemons, and ripe tomatoes stacked in colorful displays, and the vendors greeting one another, preparing their goods, sweeping cobblestones, and laughing softly. At jokes pass between them, and I pause to inhale deeply, the mixture of fresh produce, coffee, and warm bread intoxicating, a sensory reminder of the city's vitality and charm, and I watch as early shoppers, both locals and tourists, begin to wander the square, touching fruits, examining flowers, and quietly connecting with centuries of tradition that continue to unfold with each morning. I wander past a small cafe, tucked into a corner, its wooden chairs neatly aligned outside, awning rolled up, and I step in to order a cappuccino and a cornetto, the espresso rich, the pastry golden and flaky, and I find a quiet table by the window, sipping slowly, observing the city as it wakes, the soft clink of cups, the murmur of conversation, the bell tolling from a nearby church, a vendor arranging bouquets, and the occasional bicycle bell, each sound layered like notes in a delicate morning symphony, blending history and modern life, art and ritual, in a way only Rome can. Leaving the cafe, I continue to wander through alleyways lined with artisan shops now opening for business, the craftspeople carefully arranging their wares, hand-carved, wooden trinkets, painted ceramics, delicate jewelry, leather-bound notebooks, and small sculptures. And I pause to watch a young potter spin clay on his wheel, the motion hypnotic, his hands shaping a vessel with precision and grace, while the warm morning sunlight filters through the window, highlighting every curve and groove, and I feel a profound sense of connection to generations of artisans, whose skill and patience have shaped the city's soul as much as its monuments. Continuing along Via dei Giubonari and other narrow lanes, I notice the first breakfast crowds, gathering in small piazzas, waiters placing tables on the cobblestones, locals greeting each other with cheerful buongiorno, and the aroma of espresso, fresh pastries, and roasting coffee beans mingling in the air. And I pause at a corner gelateria to enjoy a scoop of creamy pistachio, savoring the sweetness while watching early pedestrians hurry past. Scooters, weaving between them, the soft sunlight glinting off windows and polished stone, and I feel a sense of timelessness, knowing that centuries of Romans have enjoyed the same rituals, the same smells, the same pleasures, in streets that have changed little over hundreds of years. From Campo de' Fiori, I drift back toward the Tiber, the morning light illuminating the river's curves, the bridges glowing softly, and I cross toward Trastevere once more, drawn by its charm, its narrow lanes, and the early energy of cafes setting up for the day. Tables and chairs emerging from shadows, shopkeepers rolling out awnings, and the soft chatter of neighbors greeting one another, creating a warm, human rhythm that perfectly complements the grandeur of nearby historical sites. And I pause to watch a street musician tuning a guitar, the notes delicate and promising. A quiet welcome to the day. The streets of Trastevere now sparkle in morning light, ivy glinting with dew, walls warm in shades of terracotta and ochre, fountains murmuring softly, and I wander aimlessly, savoring the simplicity of daily life, the smell of fresh bread, the laughter of children on their way to school, the gentle murmur of conversations spilling out of cafes. And I feel as though I am walking not just through space, but through centuries of human experience, a living tapestry woven from history, art, and everyday life. And every step reminds me why Rome is eternal, a city that continues to inspire, surprise, and embrace each visitor every hour of every day. And following the quiet streets of Trastevere, I make my way once more across the Tiber toward Vatican City. The morning sun rising gently behind the dome of St. Peter's, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, and as I approach Piazza San Pietro, the vast square spreads before me, bathed in a serene, almost ethereal light. The colonnades glowing softly, the marble gleaming faintly under the gentle touch of dawn, and I pause to take in the grandeur, the statues of saints lining, the columns, the obelisk standing tall at the center, its shadow stretching long across the plaza, and I feel a quiet awe, knowing that this moment, this calm before the day's crowds arrive, is one of the rarest ways to experience the eternal city. I wander slowly across the cobblestones, my footsteps echoing lightly in the vast open space, and I notice the subtle details illuminated by the morning light, the gentle curves of Bernini's colonnades, the intricate patterns of the paving stones, the delicate mosaics glinting faintly on the basilica facade, and as I approach the steps of St. Peter's, the massive doors seem almost welcoming in the stillness, and I step inside, greeted by the soft hush of the interior, sunlight streaming through the stained glass, dust motes floating like tiny stars, and the cool air carrying a faint scent of incense and old stone. The nave stretches ahead, grand and silent, the marble columns soaring, statues and altars catching the first rays of light. And I wander slowly, absorbing every detail, the delicate carvings, the polished floors, the quiet devotion of early visitors, and above Michelangelo's dome rises majestically, the frescoes illuminated softly, every figure, every curve, every color revealed in the gentle glow of morning, and I pause beneath the baldachin, Bernini's bronze canopy, marveling at the interplay of scale and detail, the way the monumental and the human intersect perfectly in this sacred space. Exiting the basilica, I linger in the square, watching the light shift, the first tourists arriving slowly, their footsteps and murmurs layering gently over the stillness, and I walk along the colonnades, noticing the small details often missed, the gentle flicker of candles in front of statues, plaques marking centuries of history, and the sense that every inch of this space has been touched by devotion, art, and human hands over countless generations, a continuity that transcends time itself. I follow the Via della Conciliazione toward the Tiber once more, the streets bathed in morning sunlight, cafes beginning to fill with locals and early visitors, the aroma of espresso and fresh pastries mingling with the cool air, and I pause at a small cafe to enjoy a cappuccino, savoring it slowly while watching the city fully awaken, bicycles weaving past, pedestrians chatting, vendors setting up, and the faint clatter of plates and cups from open terraces blending with the distant hum of traffic, creating a harmonious symphony of daily Roman life. Crossing the Ponte Sant'Angelo again, I notice how the angels glow in the morning light, their shadows delicate on the stone, and I pause mid-bridge to watch the Tiber glinting below, the water reflecting the sky's soft hues, the bridges arching gracefully, and the city spreading endlessly on either side, alive in a rhythm both ancient and contemporary, monumental yet intimate, as though time itself has layered over these streets and stones in ways impossible to measure, yet utterly perceptible, when one walks slowly and observes deeply. Wandering further into the streets near Piazza Navona and Campo de' Fiori, the city's energy grows with the morning, cafes filling, vendors calling out, markets vibrant, artisans arranging their goods, and I pause again at a small gelateria to savor a fresh scoop of blood orange gelato, the tart sweetness perfectly complementing the morning air, while families, friends, and couples begin to populate the squares, their laughter and conversation mingling seamlessly with the hum of scooters, the soft chime of church bells, and the distant murmur of the Tiber, creating a living tapestry of life that stretches from sunrise to sunset. Turning a corner into a narrow alleyway, I pass small, artisan workshops coming alive, hands shaping leather, painting ceramics, carving wood, and arranging delicate jewelry, each movement precise, patient, almost meditative, and I pause to watch a young glassblower blow a small vase, the molten glass glowing faintly as it spins on the rod, the craft refined and ancient, a reminder that Rome's beauty is not only in its monuments but in the hands of the people who continue its traditions. Day after day, century after century. As the sun climbs higher, I wander back toward Trastevere and the charming piazzas, where morning cafes overflow with locals enjoying espresso and cornetti. Children chase pigeons, shopkeepers sweep cobblestones, and the city hums in a rhythm both ordinary and extraordinary. And I realize that Rome's true magic is in this living, breathing, everyday life, where history, art, human activity, and ritual blend seamlessly into a continuous, unbroken story, visible to those willing to walk slowly, observe carefully, and savor each fleeting moment. And leaving the gentle morning bustle of Vatican City behind, I wander north toward Piazza del Popolo, the streets gradually widening as sunlight spills over elegant palazzi, and as I step into the square, I am struck by its grandeur. The twin churches of Santa Maria dei Miracoli and Santa Maria in Montesanto, standing like sentinels on either side. The obelisk at the center casting a long shadow across the cobblestones, and the fountains at either end glimmering in the soft mid-morning light, water cascading rhythmically, a delicate, constant soundtrack to the scene, while locals and tourists alike begin to populate the wide space, walking dogs, snapping photos, and savoring the first warmth of the sun. I pause to take in the surrounding architecture, the neoclassical facades of the palaces, the iron lamps swaying gently in the breeze, and the steps leading up to Pincio Terrace rising invitingly at the far end, promising a panoramic view of the city stretching beneath me, rooftops glowing in gold and ochre, domes punctuating the horizon, the Tiber winding like a silver ribbon, and I begin my ascent, savoring the sense of anticipation that comes with a view revealing the entirety of Rome in one sweeping glance, the grandeur of centuries laid bare, yet softened by the early warmth of the day. Reaching the terrace, I pause, leaning against the balustrade, letting my eyes roam across the city, noting the subtle interplay of rooftops and domes, the colonnades and spires, the tiny piazzas tucked like hidden gems between streets, and I breathe deeply, the morning air carrying scents of blooming flowers from nearby gardens, the faint aroma of fresh espresso from cafes below, and the distant hum of scooters and footsteps all blending into a symphony of life that is both urban and eternal. Descending back into Piazza del Popolo, I wander along Via del Corso, the main artery of Rome, streets lined with shops opening for the day, elegant boutiques and charming cafes, the sidewalks alive with the rhythm of mid-morning activity, locals strolling with purpose, tourists lingering to admire facades or duck into shops, and the occasional street performer adding a soft note of music, the scent of roasted coffee and pastries mingling with the faint tang of stone and history, and I pause to watch a florist arranging bouquets, their vivid colors brilliant against the neutral tones of the buildings, a fleeting burst of life and beauty amidst the grandeur. Turning off the bustling street, I wander into the quieter lanes toward Piazza di Spagna and the Spanish Steps, now bathed in soft, warm sunlight, steps emptying as a few early visitors ascend slowly, their movements deliberate, faces turned upward to admire the view in the Church of Trinità dei Monti, and I pause at the base, watching the play of light and shadow across the stones, the occasional flutter of pigeons, and the delicate fragrance of flowers spilling from nearby terraces, blending into the morning air, a sensory reminder that Rome rewards those who move slowly, observe carefully, and allow themselves to be absorbed into its rhythm. Continuing onward, I make my way toward Villa Borghese, the greenery becoming more pronounced as traffic thins and the air grows fresher. And entering the park, I am immediately enveloped in quiet, a serene contrast to the urban streets, the paths lined with cypress and plane trees, sunlight filtering through leaves creating dappled patterns on the walkways, and the distant hum of the city softened by the lush foliage, the singing of birds, and the gentle rustle of branches swaying in the morning breeze. I wander through the gardens, fountains sparkling in the light, statues nestled amidst trees and the manicured lawns and flower beds vibrant with color, and I pause to watch families walking slowly, children running lightly across open spaces, couples sitting on benches enjoying the quiet, and the occasional artist sketching or painting the scenery, each capturing the serenity in their own way. And I realize that Villa Borghese is not just a park, but a living canvas where nature, art, and human life intersect harmoniously, offering both respite and inspiration. Passing the Galleria Borghese, I notice groups gathering for tours, the promise of masterpieces by Bernini, Caravaggio, and Canova waiting inside, and I linger near the entrance, imagining the treasures within, their brilliance preserved across centuries, and I take a slow walk along the paths of the park, following fountains and small statues, watching the sunlight shift and dance, the reflections in ponds glimmering with the movement of birds and the occasional ripple of water. And I feel a profound sense of continuity, Rome's ability to blend urban life, art, history, and nature into a seamless experience that unfolds, moment by moment for anyone willing to explore with open eyes and heart. Exiting Villa Borghese, I drift back into the streets near Piazza del Popolo, stopping at a small cafe for another espresso and cornetto, the aroma rich, the pastry golden, and I sit outside watching the city fully alive in mid-morning, scooters weaving through traffic, locals chatting animatedly, tourists wandering with maps or cameras, street performers adding notes of music, flower vendors calling softly, and the sunlight illuminating every building and street corner, casting shadows that highlight centuries of architectural splendor. And I realize that Rome at this hour is a living painting, a city constantly in motion yet timeless. And leaving the serene greenery of Villa Borghese behind, I descend into the bustling streets of Campo Marzio, the sunlight now bright and warm, illuminating the elegant facades of palaces, the cobblestones gleaming faintly underfoot, and I'm immediately enveloped in the rhythmic energy of mid-morning Rome, locals moving with purpose, street vendors setting up their displays, the rich aroma of roasted coffee blending with fresh bread from nearby bakeries, and I pause to watch a small cafe as the barista pulls a perfect espresso, the crema swirling on top like liquid gold, while patrons chat softly over their morning ritual, a scene timeless yet alive in the present. I wander further along Via del Corso, noticing the subtle interplay of modern life and historical architecture, shop windows reflecting centuries-old buildings across the street, the occasional church, facade tucked between modern boutiques and the sounds of the city layering, a distant bell ringing, footsteps echoing on stone, scooters humming, vendors calling out, creating a symphony that is uniquely Roman, alive, layered, and vibrant. And I pause at an artisan shop specializing in handcrafted leather, the scent of fine hide and polish rich in the air, watching as a craftsman works meticulously, stitching a wallet with careful, practiced precision, his hands steady and confident, a living echo of centuries of Roman craftsmanship. Turning into a narrower street, I come upon a small market preparing for the day, baskets of colorful vegetables, fragrant herbs, ripe fruit, and fresh flowers arranged meticulously by the vendors, and I pause to take in the sensory feast, oranges and lemons glowing in the sun, bunches of basil releasing their sweet scent, tomatoes stacked perfectly, petals brushing against one another, and I notice locals selecting produce, greeting the sellers warmly, negotiating gently, exchanging smiles and small talk, creating a lively human tapestry woven into the urban fabric. And I realize that these small, everyday moments, shopping for ingredients, arranging flowers, enjoying a cappuccino, are the heartbeat of the city, just as essential as its grand monuments and historic sites. I continue wandering, passing gelaterias just opening their doors, the vibrant colors of pistachio, stracciatella, and blood orange gleaming under the morning light, and I pause to indulge, in a small scoop, savoring the creamy sweetness while observing the streets awaken. Children laughing on their way to school, couples strolling hand in hand, families enjoying a quiet breakfast in cafes spilling onto the sidewalks, and the warmth of the sun highlighting the intricate architectural details on surrounding buildings, creating shadows that accentuate centuries of artistic and cultural history. Wandering through Piazza di Pietra, I notice the columns of the ancient temple of Hadrian rising above the square, their marble glowing faintly, and I pause to admire the contrast between the ancient ruins and the vibrant life around them. Students crossing the plaza with books in hand, tourists photographing details, vendors arranging flowers or trinkets, street musicians tuning instruments, the faint clatter of dishes from a nearby cafe, the distant hum of traffic weaving between streets, and I am struck by how seamlessly Rome layers history and modernity, monumental architecture and ordinary human life, into a continuous living story. Continuing onward toward Piazza Colonna, I pass the impressive column of Marcus Aurelius, its spiraling bas-reliefs capturing centuries-old narratives, and I watch as office workers, vendors, and visitors interact around it, the city alive with movement yet somehow graceful, orchestrated and fluid. Every sound, every step, every flutter of fabric or paper part of a rhythm that has played across generations. And I feel myself absorbed into this pulse, walking through a space that is both contemporary and ancient, bustling yet intimate. A short walk leads me to a small cafe tucked near Piazza di San Lorenzo, its tables already dotted with patrons enjoying mid-morning espresso, pastries, and quiet conversation. And I stop to enjoy a second cappuccino, observing the subtle interactions around me, the careful gestures of a barista, the soft laughter of friends meeting, the hurried steps of someone late for work, the delicate placement of sugar cubes, the gentle clink of ceramic cups. And I realize that in Rome, the artistry of daily life, craft, coffee, conversation, human movement, is as mesmerizing as the grand architecture and historic sites, an invisible yet essential part of the city's character. From there, I wander down quiet lanes lined with small artisan shops, observing sculptors shaping marble, painters capturing street scenes on canvas, and leatherworkers crafting belts and wallets, the soft sound of tools striking material blending with the distant murmur of the city. And I pause at a small jewelry workshop where the glint of gold and silver catches the sunlight, every piece reflecting centuries of craftsmanship and tradition, and I marvel at how deeply embedded artistry is in every aspect of Roman life, not just in museums or churches, but in streets, cafes, markets, and workshops, a living, breathing continuum of human expression. Continuing toward Piazza di Spagna, I follow the flow of morning pedestrians, the Spanish steps bathed in sunlight, tourists beginning to climb the stairs, photographers framing the view, locals passing by with purpose, and I pause at the base, watching the interplay of motion and stillness, history and life, stone and human energy, and I feel the essence of Rome in a single moment. Monumental yet intimate, historic yet present, grand yet composed of countless small, ordinary, yet extraordinary details, each contributing to a city that is alive in every hour of the day. And as late morning gives way to early afternoon, I wander back toward Piazza Navona, the sun now high in the sky, casting a golden glow over the fountains, and the square is beginning to fill with life. Tourists strolling slowly, couples pausing to photograph the ornate fountains, children laughing and chasing pigeons, street performers entertaining small crowds, and vendors arranging prints, masks, and trinkets along the edges, the air alive with sounds, scents, and the unmistakable energy of the city in full motion, and I pause to admire the delicate water dancing over Bernini's figures in the Fountain of the Four Rivers, the marble glinting in sunlight, reflections rippling on the surface, the gentle murmur of the water blending perfectly with laughter and soft conversation. From the piazza, I wander into the narrow lanes leading toward Campo de' Fiori, the market square now bustling, Colorful stalls overflowing with fresh vegetables, fruits, flowers, and herbs, the scent of citrus and basil mingling with warm bread from nearby bakeries, and locals negotiating gently with vendors, the rhythm of trade ancient yet immediate. While children dart between stalls, tourists snap photos, and the hum of scooters and passing footsteps adds a modern pulse to the timeless scene, creating a vibrant mosaic of life that is distinctly Roman. I pause at a small trattoria at the edge of the square, its outdoor tables shaded by umbrellas, and I order a classic plate of pasta, cacio e pepe, creamy and peppery, paired with a crisp glass of local white wine. And I savor the flavors slowly, enjoying not only the food but the living theater of Campo de Fiori around me. The vendors calling out in cheerful tones, customers selecting flowers, fruit, and vegetables, the faint chatter of nearby cafes and the sun illuminating the facades of the surrounding buildings, their pastel tones warmed by light, the textures of centuries-old plaster and stone made vivid by the midday glow. Finishing my meal, I drift through the surrounding lanes, pausing to admire artisan workshops tucked between cafes and restaurants. Windows filled with hand-painted ceramics, polished leather goods, delicate jewelry, and miniature sculptures. The subtle sound of tools striking stone or metal blending with the hum of conversation, the distant clatter of dishes, and the faint strumming of a guitar from a street performer, creating a rich sensory layering that is quintessentially Roman. A city where history, art, and everyday life merge seamlessly. I make my way back toward Piazza Navona once more, drawn by the energy of midday, and notice how the fountains, churches, and palaces take on a different character under the higher sun. Shadows shorter, colors more vivid, water sparkling intensely in light, and the square now a hub of activity. With families enjoying gelato, artists sketching the scene, vendors arranging their prints, and cafe tables bustling with locals enjoying a leisurely lunch or a cooling espresso, and I pause to savor a small scoop of pistachio gelato, creamy and fragrant, while observing the interplay of movement, architecture, and light around me. From Piazza Navona, I wander into the nearby lanes toward Via dei Coronari, a street famous for its antique shops, small galleries, and artisan boutiques, and I pause frequently to peer into windows displaying centuries-old prints, delicate jewelry, carved wood, and hand-bound books, the scent of old paper and polish mingling with fresh espresso from cafes spilling onto the street. And I watch, as locals and tourists alike browse, selecting treasures, photographing details, and interacting with the shopkeepers, whose knowledge and pride in their craft animate the scene, connecting past and present in a living continuum. Continuing along the street, I drift toward small piazzas where fountains murmur gently, children play quietly, and elderly men sit chatting on benches, gesturing with hands, their voices low yet animated, and I pause to watch the rhythm of everyday life, noticing small gestures, a cat leaping gracefully onto a stone ledge, a florist arranging a final bouquet, the gleam of sunlight on a polished shoe, the delicate pattern of shadow cast by an ornate balcony, and I realize that Rome's beauty lies not only in grand monuments or historic landmarks, but in these intimate, fleeting moments, in the continuous layering of ordinary and extraordinary, past and present. Wandering further, I find a small gelateria tucked between two buildings, its colors bright under the midday sun, and I indulge in a final scoop of stracciatella, savoring its creamy sweetness while walking slowly through the adjacent piazzas, observing couples, pausing to photograph fountains, children spinning around in open spaces, street musicians plucking guitar strings, and cafe tables spilling over with diners, each element blending into a living, breathing tableau of Roman life, a mosaic of movement, history, and sensory delight that continues to unfold hour by hour, day by day, century by century. And as the afternoon sun climbs higher, I wander toward the Pantheon once more, the surrounding streets now alive with energy, cafes spilling onto cobblestones, and tourists pausing to photograph the magnificent portico, its columns glowing warmly under the sunlight, and I step inside for a brief moment, the cool interior providing relief from the heat, the vast dome above, punctured by the oculus, casting a single beam of light across the ancient marble floor, dust motes floating lazily in the golden shaft, and I paused to breathe in the history, art, and human devotion layered into this sacred space. Centuries of footsteps echoing softly in the vast hall. Exiting, I wander through Piazza della Rotonda, the square bustling with cafe patrons enjoying mid-afternoon espresso, gelato, or light meals, and the aroma of roasted coffee mingling with fresh pastries, while street performers entertain small crowds, musicians plucking delicate notes from violins or guitars, their melodies drifting over the cobblestones, and vendors arrange prints, postcards, and souvenirs in carefully organized displays, creating a sensory tapestry of color, scent, sound, and movement that is quintessentially Roman. I drift south toward Piazza Venezia, the heart of the city, where the Vittoriano monument rises majestically, gleaming white in the afternoon light, its grand staircase filled with visitors pausing to photograph the city from above, and the surrounding streets alive with the hum of scooters, pedestrians, and the occasional street musician, the combination of modern urban rhythm and historic grandeur creating a pulse unique to Rome, a blend of centuries layered seamlessly, each moment both fleeting and timeless. From Piazza Venezia, I wander along Via dei Fori Imperiali, the street stretching toward the Colosseum, flanked by ancient ruins and archaeological sites, and I pause frequently, admiring the Forum's grandeur in soft afternoon light, shadows emphasizing the textures of columns, arches, and stones, the air warm yet gentle, carrying the faint scent of earth stone and occasional espresso from nearby cafes, while tourists and locals walk past, each absorbed in their own exploration, adding movement and life to this ancient thoroughfare. Reaching the Colosseum, I pause at its massive arches, the sunlight casting intricate patterns on the weathered stone, highlighting centuries of history, and I wander around its perimeter observing small groups of visitors photographing details, street vendors offering souvenirs, and guides explaining the stories of gladiators, emperors, and spectacles that once unfolded within, while pigeons flutter around fountains and niches, adding subtle movement to the scene, a quiet reminder that life continues amid grandeur and history alike. Nearby, I find a small trattoria tucked into a side street, its tables shaded by umbrellas, and I order a light lunch, bruschetta topped with fresh tomatoes, basil, and olive oil, accompanied by a crisp local wine, and I savor the flavors slowly while observing the streets, scooters weaving through traffic, locals chatting animatedly, families walking hand in hand, children laughing, and the occasional street performer adding music or theatrics, each detail contributing to the living, breathing mosaic that is Rome, where the ordinary and the monumental coexist seamlessly. After lunch, I wander through the streets toward the Colleopio Gardens, green spaces rising slightly above the city, offering views of the Colosseum and surrounding ruins, shaded paths lined with cypress and plane trees, fountains sparkling in the sun, and benches where locals relax, read, or enjoy a quiet conversation, and I pause to breathe deeply, feeling the blend of nature, history, and urban life around me. The rustle of leaves, distant hum of traffic, and faint laughter merging into a harmonious urban symphony that continues to unfold with each passing hour. From the gardens, I drift back toward Via Cavour and surrounding lanes, passing artisan shops, gelaterias, and cafes, the afternoon sun highlighting every detail, the warm tones of building facades, intricate iron balconies, shutters casting delicate shadows on stone walls, flowers spilling from windowsills, and shopkeepers arranging their goods with care, creating a rich tapestry of sensory experiences, a combination of visual beauty, scent, taste, and sound that captures the essence of everyday Roman life amidst its grand monuments and historic streets. I pause at a gelateria, indulging in a refreshing scoop of lemon gelato, creamy and slightly tart, as I continue walking through small piazzas where fountains glimmer under the sun, children play, locals chat on benches, and tourists wander slowly, maps in hand, observing the city with curiosity, cameras poised and the light shifting subtly across statues, columns, and arches, each movement of sun and shadow adding dimension, and life to the already vibrant urban landscape. A city both monumental and intimately human, alive in every moment. And as late afternoon settles, the sun begins its gentle descent, casting a warm, golden light across the city, illuminating the Colosseum once more, the ancient stone glowing warmly, shadows stretching across arches and streets, and I pause to take in the view, feeling the centuries of history layered in every curve, crack, and column, while locals and tourists alike wander the surrounding streets, snapping photos, pausing to rest, or enjoying a gelato, their laughter and chatter blending harmoniously with the distant hum of traffic and soft rustle of leaves from nearby trees. Leaving the Colosseum, I wander toward Piazza Venezia again, the afternoon sunlight bathing the Vittoriano monument in a gentle glow, the wide staircase bustling with visitors, photographers, and passers-by, and I pause to watch the movement, scooters weaving gracefully through traffic, street performers entertaining small crowds, locals chatting as they walk, and children darting past with playful energy. Each moment a living layer of the city's vibrant, ongoing story, continuing along Via del Corso toward Piazza del Popolo. The streets now alive with mid to late afternoon energy, cafes spilling onto sidewalks, tables filled with patrons enjoying espresso or light meals, and the aroma of roasting, coffee mingling with fresh pastries, flowers, and baked bread. And I pause at a small gelateria to savor a refreshing scoop of pistachio, the creamy sweetness perfectly complementing the warmth of the sun, while observing the rhythm of life. Tourists photographing fountains, families strolling, street musicians performing soft melodies, and shopkeepers arranging goods with care, all blending into the rich tapestry of daily Roman life. Reaching Piazza del Popolo, I wander up the steps to Pincio Terrace again, the city now bathed in warm late afternoon light, rooftops glowing in golden hues, domes and spires reflecting the fading sun, the Tiber curling below like a silver ribbon, and I pause at the balustrade to breathe deeply, absorbing the view, the movement of people across the square, and the subtle changes of light as the day shifts toward evening, a moment of quiet reflection amidst the constant rhythm of the city. Descending back into the streets, I drift toward Piazza di Spagna and the Spanish Steps, now alive with energy. Tourists ascending slowly, pausing to admire the view from the top, locals navigating quickly, vendors arranging flowers or trinkets, and musicians performing light melodies, the sunlight softening as it touches facades, illuminating the steps in warm amber tones, shadows stretching delicately across the stones, and I pause at the base, taking in the interplay of movement, light, and architecture, a quintessential Roman scene that blends everyday life with centuries of history. From there, I wander into the lanes surrounding Piazza Navona, the fountains shimmering in late afternoon light, artists sketching the scene, families and couples strolling, and cafes beginning to prepare for evening diners, tables aligned neatly on cobblestones, candles and lanterns waiting to be lit, and the aromas of roasting coffee, fresh pastries, and evening meals mingling with the faint scent of flowers from nearby windowsills, creating a sensory tapestry that is rich, vibrant, and unmistakably Roman. As the sun dips lower, I find a small trattoria tucked into a side lane. It's outdoor, tables bathed in golden light, and I pause for an early dinner. A plate of fresh pasta, olive oil glistening on perfectly cooked noodles, paired with a crisp glass of local white wine, while observing the streets, alive yet intimate, children playing near fountains, couples laughing, friends enjoying conversation, street musicians performing soft melodies, and vendors arranging the last of their goods before the evening crowd, all blending into a living mosaic of daily life. After dinner, I drift along the Tiber, the bridges glowing softly as the sun sets, reflections shimmering in the river, and I pause on Ponte Sant'Angelo to admire the angels standing sentinel over the water, bathed in the last rays of light, and the city transforming around me. Lanterns flickering on, streetlights casting warm halos, distant music from piazzas drifting softly, and the quiet murmur of footsteps echoing off ancient stones, creating a seamless transition from day to evening, history to modern life, monumental to intimate. Wandering further into Trastevere, the streets now alive with evening energy, cafes and trattorias glowing, locals and tourists mingling, and the faint strumming of guitars or soft jazz spilling into lanes. I pause at a gelateria to enjoy a final scoop of chocolate, savoring the flavor while walking through piazzas where laughter, conversation, and movement continue to layer over centuries of history. The city alive in a way that is timeless, flowing, and endlessly captivating. And I realize that Rome at this hour is both intimate and grand, vibrant yet contemplative, a living city whose pulse continues long into the night. And as night falls, the city transforms under a canopy of deep blue, the glow of streetlights and illuminated monuments creating a magical, almost ethereal atmosphere. And I wander once more toward the Colosseum, now bathed in golden light, its arches glowing against the darkening sky, tourists still lingering to photograph its magnificence, and the gentle hum of the city surrounding it, the distant murmur of conversation, the soft clatter of footsteps on cobblestones, and the occasional scooter passing, blending seamlessly with the grandeur of history, creating a moment both alive and timeless. Leaving the Colosseum, I drift along Via dei Fori Imperiali, the ancient ruins softly illuminated, shadows stretching across columns and arches, and I pause to admire the Forum from a quiet vantage point, the play of light highlighting intricate details of stone and sculpture. While the city moves steadily around me, couples strolling hand in hand, street performers entertaining small crowds, and vendors closing the last of their evening displays, each detail contributing to the living tableau that is Rome at night. Crossing. Piazza Venezia once again. The Vittoriano monument glows brilliantly, its white marble radiant against the night sky, and I pause to photograph the interplay of light and shadow on its columns and statues, while the square hums with life. Tourists lingering, locals chatting animatedly, scooters weaving gracefully through traffic, and the soft strains of music drifting from nearby streets, creating a sensory symphony that blends modern urban rhythm with the timeless weight of history. From there, I wander toward Piazza Navona, the fountains shimmering under evening lights, water dancing softly over Bernini's figures, and the square alive with laughter, music, and conversation, cafes spilling their warm light onto cobblestones, and artists capturing the scene in sketches or paintings, the scent of roasted coffee, pastries, and evening meals mingling in the air, while families, couples, and friends enjoy the evening, adding movement and life to the historical backdrop. A seamless blend of past and present, continuing along narrow lanes toward Campo de' Fiori, the market square now quieting from the day's bustle but still alive with the remnants of its energy. Closed stalls glowing faintly under streetlights, a few early night vendors arranging late goods, and the soft murmur of pedestrians walking through, while nearby cafes prepare for dinner service, tables illuminated with candlelight, glasses sparkling, and the gentle clinking of cutlery creating a rhythmic backdrop to the city's nocturnal heartbeat. I drift toward Trastevere, where the narrow lanes glow warmly under lantern light, the streets alive with evening diners, laughter spilling from trattorias, and soft guitar or jazz music drifting from open windows, and I pause to observe. Couples walking slowly, friends chatting over wine, children laughing near fountains, cats slinking across cobblestones, and artisans arranging wares for late-night browsers, creating an atmosphere that is intimate, timeless, and vibrant, a city both alive and steeped in centuries of history. Crossing the Tiber via Ponte Sant'Angelo, the angels gleam in the reflected lights from the river, the water catching and multiplying the glow, and I pause to admire the view. St. Peter's Basilica illuminated majestically in the distance, its dome glowing, the city around it alive, yet serene, and the combination of reflections, shadows, and human movement creates a sense of timeless continuity, as though the city itself breathes, alive through centuries, moments, and generations, each detail resonating with history, art, and everyday life. Finally, I wander into smaller piazzas and side streets where night cafes still serve espresso or gelato, a few last musicians perform, and the quiet rhythm of footsteps, laughter, and conversation continues to layer over the centuries-old stones, fountains shimmering, walls glowing under lanterns, and I realize that Rome at night is simultaneously monumental and intimate, alive yet contemplative, offering endless discovery for anyone willing to walk, observe, and absorb its energy, beauty, and timeless charm. As I pause on a quiet street corner, the city's lights reflecting in the Tiber, fountains shimmering, and the distant murmur of nightlife blending with the soft rustle of leaves and cobblestones underfoot, I feel an overwhelming sense of connection to the city, to history, to art, and to life itself. And I know that walking Rome in a single day, from sunrise to nightfall, from quiet piazzas to bustling markets, from ancient ruins to intimate lanes, reveals a city that is truly eternal, vibrant, and endlessly captivating. And as midnight deepens, the city quiets into a serene, almost sacred calm, the usual hum of scooters and chatter fading into whispers, and I wander once more through the cobblestone streets, the glow of lanterns casting soft halos on facades, fountains shimmering in the gentle lamplight, and the occasional passerby moving silently, footsteps echoing lightly, creating a rhythm both solitary and comforting, as though the city itself is breathing slowly, preparing for the dawn that will come in a few hours. I drift toward Piazza Navona again, now nearly empty, the fountains glowing under gentle spotlights, water glimmering softly, reflecting statues and palaces in delicate patterns, while the absence of crowds allows me to absorb every detail, the expressions carved into marble, the ripples of water catching the lantern light, the faint rustle of leaves from nearby trees, and the subtle scent of flowers lingering from the day's warmth. And I pause to breathe, feeling the city's pulse in its quietest, most intimate moments. From there, I wander toward the Pantheon, its portico illuminated softly, shadows highlighting the column's grandeur, the square nearly deserted except for a lone passerby or the occasional night security guard, and the calm allows the stone, marble, and ancient history to speak directly, the sense of centuries flowing beneath my feet, every echo of footsteps connecting me to the countless souls who have walked these streets before, and I marvel at how Rome is never truly silent, yet transforms its energy into a gentle, meditative presence at this hour. Continuing toward Campo de Fiori, the square lies in shadow, the closed stalls dark, the colors of fruits, flowers, and vegetables subdued under streetlights, yet the square is alive in memory. I recall the daytime energy, the laughter, the vendors, and now the empty square feels reflective, almost sacred, the city holding its breath, waiting for morning to return, while distant music from a nearby trattoria floats softly into the night, a reminder that life continues even in quiet hours, unseen but felt. Crossing the Tiber via Ponte Sant'Angelo, the angels bathed in soft lamplight, their reflections doubling in the calm water below, I pause mid-bridge to look toward St. Peter's Basilica, illuminated magnificently against the dark sky, its dome a beacon of art, faith, and history, and the quiet river carries the reflections of the city like liquid gold, the faint sound of water lapping against the banks mixing with the distant, soft hum of the city, creating a meditative symphony of light, sound, and space. I wander into Trastevere's narrow lanes once more, the lanterns glowing gently, the cobblestones quiet underfoot, the occasional cafe still open, serving a late espresso or gelato to a few lingering patrons, musicians strumming softly in a corner, and the faint laughter of friends echoing, blending seamlessly with the ancient stones and ivy-clad walls, the city feeling intimate, alive, and timeless. A perfect contrast to the daytime energy, revealing another layer of Rome's character that only emerges in the late hours. As the night deepens toward pre-dawn, I drift along quiet piazzas and streets, fountains shimmering faintly under soft lights, shadows dancing gently across statues, arches and balconies, and I pause on a small bridge over a calm canal. The reflections of buildings and lanterns, glimmering on the water, the air cool, the city hushed, and I feel a profound sense of connection, not only to the history and architecture, but to the life of the city itself, a living continuum that flows through every street, piazza, and stone, night blending into day, past into present. Finally, as the first hints of pre-dawn light begin to soften the horizon, a gentle glow brushing the rooftops, I return once more toward Piazza del Popolo, the city slowly awakening again. Distant footsteps, the soft hum of a few early risers, the aroma of fresh bread from a nearby bakery beginning to permeate the air, and I pause at the Pincio Terrace to watch the very first light touch the domes, fountains and rooftops completing a full circle, from night to sunrise, from quiet streets to bustling piazzas, from monumental ruins to intimate cafes, Rome revealing its timeless, continuous pulse, endlessly vibrant, endlessly captivating. The day begins as the first light of dawn brushes softly over the rooftops of Rome, painting the sky in pale pinks and golds. The city is quiet, the streets nearly empty, and I step out from a small, charming inn into the cool morning air, the scent of fresh bread and espresso drifting faintly from nearby cafes. Cobblestones glisten softly under the morning light, and as I wander through narrow lanes, the ancient walls and ornate balconies of centuries-old buildings reveal the depth of Rome's history with each step. Passing through a quiet piazza, I notice the fountains shimmering in the early sun, water catching light in delicate ripples, statues carved with exquisite detail stand sentinel, seemingly frozen yet alive with the stories they hold. A street artist begins setting up his easel, brushes and paints arranged carefully, ready to capture the city's waking beauty. I pause for a moment, letting the soft hum of early morning, the distant toll of church bells, footsteps echoing faintly on cobblestones, the gentle murmur of the Tiber nearby, envelop me. Each detail, each sound seems both ordinary and profound, the city alive in its slow, deliberate awakening. I wander toward the Pantheon, the square nearly empty, the portico glowing warmly in the morning sun. Stepping inside, the cool air contrasts with the bright streets outside, and I look upward at the magnificent dome, sunlight streaming through the oculus, illuminating dust motes that float like tiny stars. Marble floors reflect subtle light, statues and altars stand in quiet dignity, and I feel centuries of footsteps layered beneath mine. Exiting, I drift toward Piazza Navona, where the fountains sparkle, statues cast delicate shadows, and the square, though still calm, hints at the day's forthcoming energy. The lanes leading toward Campo dei Fiori carry the scent of fresh herbs, ripe fruit, and warm bread. Market stalls begin to bustle with vendors arranging colorful displays. Oranges, lemons, tomatoes, bouquets of flowers spilling their fragrance into the air. Locals greet each other warmly, their voices blending with the soft rustle of leaves and distant footsteps. I pause at a small cafe tucked into a corner, ordering a cappuccino and cornetto, savoring the rich espresso and flaky pastry while observing the quiet morning symphony. The first shoppers strolling, the street artist, capturing light on canvas, and the gentle interplay of shadow and sun across centuries-old facades. Wandering into artisan workshops, I watch hands shape leather, carve wood and mold clay, each movement precise and practiced, a living continuation of traditions passed through generations. Gelaterias begin to open, bright colors of pistachio, stracciatella, and blood orange gleaming under morning sunlight. I indulge in a small scoop, walking slowly and absorbing the vibrant life awakening around me. Children laughing on their way to school, couples strolling hand in hand, the distant hum of scooters threading through streets, and the warm aroma of espresso lingering on the air. Crossing the Tiber toward Trastevere, narrow lanes glow with the soft warmth of morning sunlight. Cafes set tables outside, shopkeepers arrange wares, and locals greet one another with cheerful buongiorno. The ivy-clad walls, terracotta facades, and gently rippling fountains create an atmosphere that is both intimate and timeless. I pause on a small bridge, watching water shimmer under the first light, reflections of buildings dancing across the surface, and feel a deep connection to the city's rhythm, its layering of daily life over centuries of history, art, and architecture. As Late morning approaches, I wander toward Piazza del Popolo, the twin churches standing sentinel at either end, fountains glimmering, and the obelisk casting long shadows. Visitors begin to populate the square, some strolling leisurely, others pausing to photograph the grandeur. I ascend the steps to Pincio Terrace, where the city stretches below in a sprawling panorama. Rooftops glowing, domes punctuating the horizon, the Tiber winding gracefully, and every detail, from rooftops to piazzas to distant bridges, is revealed in soft, golden morning light. Descending toward Via del Corso, the street pulses with mid-morning energy. Elegant boutiques, cafes spilling onto sidewalks, and street performers entertaining small crowds. I pause at a leather artisan shop, watching meticulous hands craft wallets and belts, each stitch a testament to centuries-old skill. Markets in Campo Marzio overflow with vegetables, fruit, and flowers, their colors vivid under the sun, while locals haggle gently. Children dart between stalls, and the air hums with life, scent, and sound. I pause for a small gelato, savoring the creamy sweetness as I continue wandering through piazzas and narrow lanes, absorbing the seamless blend of historic architecture, daily life, and artistry that defines Rome. Midday finds me back near Piazza Navona and Campo de' Fiori, cafes filled, with patrons enjoying espresso, light meals, and laughter. I stop for a plate of pasta at a trattoria, savoring flavors while observing the city in motion. Vendors arranging flowers, tourists photographing fountains, and artisans at work in quiet corners. Streets shimmer under the midday sun, shadows shortening, colors vibrant, and every movement, sound, and scent adds another layer to the living, breathing cityscape. By mid-afternoon, I approach the Pantheon again, stepping briefly inside to admire the light streaming through its oculus. Crossing Piazza Venezia, I pause before the Vittoriano monument, observing the interplay of shadow and sunlight on its grand marble. Via dei Fori Imperiali leads me toward the Colosseum, flanked by ancient ruins, the Forum glowing softly under afternoon light. At the Colosseum, tourists wander, vendors offer souvenirs, pigeons flutter near fountains, and the ancient stones resonate with stories of gladiators and emperors, alive amid the rhythm of modern Rome. After a light, late afternoon lunch, I wander through Calle Oppio gardens, shaded paths lined with trees, fountains sparkling in the sun, and benches occupied by locals relaxing, reading, or conversing. Artisan shops along Via Cavour offer glimpses of marble, leather, and hand-bound books. I pause frequently, savoring small details, sunlight catching intricate ironwork, reflections in shop windows, flowers spilling from windowsills, and the soft murmur of passing pedestrians. As late afternoon becomes early evening, the sun casts a warm glow over monuments and piazzas. I pause at Piazza del Popolo, Spanish Steps, Piazza Navona, and Trastevere, cafes glowing warmly, lanterns prepared, fountains shimmering, street musicians performing soft melodies, and locals and tourists mingling in the golden light. I pause for an early dinner, bruschetta, pasta, and crisp wine at a small trattoria, observing life unfolding around me in a harmonious blend of past and present, monumental and intimate. Night falls, the Colosseum bathed in golden illumination, Via dei Fori Imperiali softly lit, Piazza Venezia radiant under lamps, and Piazza Navona alive with the glow of cafe lights and fountains. Trastevere's narrow lanes glow warmly, lanterns reflecting off cobblestones, and soft music drifts from open windows, blending with the quiet murmur of nighttime life. I wander bridges over the Tiber, angels gleaming, reflections multiplying. In calm waters, St. Peter's Basilica illuminated majestically in the distance, the city alive yet serene, monumental yet intimate. As midnight deepens, the streets grow quiet, cobblestones reflecting lamplight, fountains shimmering under soft illumination, and I wander once more through empty piazzas, feeling the city breathe in silence. The Pantheon glows softly, Campo de' Fiori rests from the day's bustle, and the Tiber mirrors lanterns and buildings in delicate ripples. Treve's quiet alleys carry the faint hum of distant music, and I feel a profound sense of connection to history, architecture, art, and life itself. Finally, in the pre-dawn hours, the first hints of light brush the rooftops. I return to Piazza del Popolo, observing the city slowly awakening. Early footsteps, faint conversations, the aroma of fresh bread and coffee from nearby bakeries. The first rays of sunlight touch domes, fountains, and rooftops, completing the cycle from night to sunrise, quiet streets to bustling piazzas, monumental ruins to intimate cafes. Rome reveals itself in full, its timeless pulse flowing continuously, endlessly vibrant and endlessly captivating, a city eternal in every detail, every moment, every breath. Rome, 24-hour walking tour, immersive experience. Sunrise, dawn awakens. Rome, the day begins as the first light of dawn brushes softly over the rooftops of Rome, painting the sky in pale pinks and golds. The city is quiet, the streets nearly empty, and I step out from a small, charming inn into the cool morning air, the scent of fresh bread and espresso drifting faintly from nearby cafes. Cobblestones glisten softly under the morning light, and as I wander through narrow lanes, the ancient walls and ornate balconies of centuries-old buildings reveal the depth of Rome's history with each step. Passing through a quiet piazza, I notice the fountains shimmering in the early sun, water catching light in delicate ripples. Statues carved with exquisite detail stand sentinel, seemingly frozen yet alive with the stories they hold. A street artist begins setting up his easel, brushes and paints arranged carefully, ready to capture the city's waking beauty. I pause for a moment, letting the soft hum of early morning, the distant toll of church bells, footsteps echoing faintly on cobblestones, the gentle murmur of the Tiber nearby, envelop me. Each detail, each sound, seems both ordinary and profound, the city alive in its slow, deliberate awakening. I wander toward the Pantheon, the square nearly empty, the portico glowing warmly in the morning sun. Stepping inside, the cool air contrasts with the bright streets outside, and I look upward at the magnificent dome, sunlight streaming through the oculus illuminating dust motes that float like tiny stars. Marble floors reflect subtle light, statues and altars stand in quiet dignity, and I feel centuries of footsteps layered beneath mine. Exiting, I drift toward Piazza Navona, where the fountains sparkle, statues cast delicate shadows, and the square, though still calm, hints at the day's forthcoming energy. Morning, markets, artisan streets, and cafes. The lanes leading toward Campo de' Fiori carry the scent of fresh herbs, ripe fruit, and warm bread. Market stalls begin to bustle with vendors arranging colorful displays. Oranges, lemons, tomatoes, bouquets of flowers spilling their fragrance into the air. Locals greet each other warmly, their voices blending with the soft rustle of leaves and distant footsteps. I pause at a small cafe tucked into a corner, ordering a cappuccino and cornetto, savoring the rich espresso and flaky pastry while observing the quiet morning symphony. The first shoppers strolling, the street artist, capturing light on canvas, and the gentle interplay of shadow and sun across centuries-old facades. Wandering into artisan workshops, I watch hands shape leather, carve wood, and mold clay, each movement precise and practiced, a living continuation of traditions passed through generations. Gelaterias begin to open, bright colors of pistachio, stracciatella, and blood orange gleaming under morning sunlight. I indulge in a small scoop, walking slowly and absorbing the vibrant life awakening around me. Children laughing on their way to school, couples strolling hand in hand, the distant hum of scooters threading through streets, and the warm aroma of espresso lingering on the air. Crossing the Tiber toward Trastevere, narrow lanes glow with the soft warmth of morning sunlight. Cafes set tables outside, shopkeepers arrange wares, and locals greet one another with cheerful buongiorno. The ivy-clad walls, terracotta facades, and gently rippling fountains create an atmosphere that is both intimate and timeless. I pause on a small bridge, watching water shimmer under the first light, reflections of buildings dancing across the surface, and feel a deep connection to the city's rhythm, its layering of daily life over centuries of history, art, and architecture. Midday. Piazza life, lunch, and streets alive. As late morning approaches, I wandered toward Piazza del Popolo, the twin churches standing sentinel at either end, fountains glimmering, and the obelisk casting long shadows. Visitors begin to populate the square, some strolling leisurely, others pausing to photograph the grandeur. I ascend the steps to Pincio Terrace, where the city stretches below in a sprawling panorama, rooftops glowing, domes punctuating the horizon, the Tiber winding gracefully, and every detail, from rooftops to piazzas to distant bridges, is revealed in soft, golden morning light. Descending toward Via del Corso, the street pulses with mid-morning energy. Elegant boutiques, cafes spilling onto sidewalks, and street performers entertaining small crowds. I pause at a leather artisan shop watching meticulous, hands-craft wallets and belts, each stitch a testament to centuries-old skill. Markets in Campo Marzio overflow with vegetables, fruit, and flowers, their colors vivid under the sun. While locals haggle gently, children dart between stalls, and the air hums with life, scent, and sound. I pause for a small gelato, savoring the creamy sweetness as I continue wandering through piazzas and narrow lanes, absorbing the seamless blend of historic architecture, daily life, and artistry that defines Rome. Midday finds me back near Piazza Navona and Campo de' Fiori, cafes filled with patrons enjoying espresso, light meals, and laughter. I stop for a plate of pasta at a trattoria, savoring flavors while observing the city in motion. Vendors arranging flowers, tourists photographing, fountains and artisans at work in quiet corners. Streets shimmer under the midday sun, shadows shortening, colors vibrant, and every movement, sound, and scent adds another layer to the living, breathing cityscape. Afternoon. Monuments, gardens, and Colosseum. By mid-afternoon, I approach the Pantheon again, stepping briefly inside to admire the light streaming through its oculus. Crossing Piazza Venezia, I pause before the Vittoriano monument, observing the interplay of shadow and sunlight on its grand marble. Via dei Fori Imperiali leads me toward the Colosseum, flanked by ancient ruins, the Forum glowing softly under afternoon light. At the Colosseum, tourists wander, vendors offer souvenirs, pigeons flutter near fountains, and the ancient stones resonate with stories of gladiators and emperors, alive amid the rhythm of modern Rome. After a light late-afternoon lunch, I wander through Colleopio Gardens, shaded paths lined with trees, fountains sparkling in the sun, and benches occupied by locals relaxing, reading, or conversing. Artisan shops along Via Cavour offer glimpses of marble, leather, and hand-bound books. I pause frequently, savoring small details, sunlight catching intricate ironwork, reflections in shop windows, flowers spilling from windowsills, and the soft murmur of passing pedestrians. Evening. Sunset, fountains, and dining as late afternoon. Becomes early evening. The sun casts a warm glow over monuments and piazzas. I pause at Piazza del Popolo, Spanish Steps, Piazza Navona, and Trastevere. Cafes glowing warmly, lanterns prepared, fountains shimmering, street musicians performing soft melodies, and locals and tourists mingling in the golden light. I pause for an early dinner, bruschetta, pasta, and crisp wine at a small trattoria, observing life unfolding around me in a harmonious blend of past and present, monumental and intimate. Night. Illuminated monuments and street life. Night falls. The Colosseum bathed in golden illumination, Via dei Fori Imperiali softly lit, Piazza Venezia radiant under lamps, and Piazza Navona alive with the glow of cafe lights and fountains. Trastevere's narrow lanes glow warmly, lanterns reflecting off cobblestones, and soft music drifts from open windows, blending with the quiet murmur of nighttime life. I wander bridges over the Tiber, angels gleaming, reflections multiplying in calm waters. St. Peter's Basilica illuminated majestically in the distance, the city alive yet serene, monumental yet intimate. Late night and pre-dawn, quiet streets. And reflections as midnight deepens, the streets grow quiet. Cobblestones reflecting lamplight, fountains shimmering under soft illumination, and I wander once more through empty piazzas, feeling the city breathe in silence. The Pantheon glows softly, Campo de' Fiori rests from the day's bustle, and the Tiber mirrors lanterns and buildings in delicate ripples. Trustevere's quiet alleys carry the faint hum of distant music, and I feel a profound sense of connection, not only to history and architecture but to the life of the city itself, a living continuum that flows through every street, piazza, and stone. Finally, in the pre-dawn hours, the first hints of light brush the rooftops. I return to Piazza del Popolo, observing the city slowly awakening. Early footsteps, faint conversations, the aroma of fresh bread and coffee from nearby bakeries. The first rays of sunlight touch domes, fountains, and rooftops, completing the cycle from night to sunrise. Quiet streets to bustling piazzas, monumental ruins to intimate cafes. Rome reveals itself in full, its timeless pulse flowing continuously, endlessly vibrant and endlessly captivating. A city eternal in every detail, every moment, every breath. The first light of dawn spills gently over the terracotta rooftops of Rome, brushing the city in delicate hues of pink, gold, and soft lavender. And I step quietly from a small, charming inn into the cool morning air, the cobblestones glistening with dew, reflecting the fragile, fleeting glow of early light. The streets are still mostly empty, save for the occasional early riser, an elderly man walking his small dog, the rhythmic clatter of his shoes on stone echoing faintly against the walls, and a lone street sweeper methodically pushing his broom along the narrow lanes, his movements precise, almost meditative, each sweep gathering remnants of the previous day. The air carries the faint aroma of fresh bread and roasted coffee, drifting from cafes already preparing to open, mingling subtly with the faint scent of morning dew, the faint fragrance of flowers spilling from windowsills, and the earthy perfume of the Tiber flowing nearby. I wander slowly, absorbing every detail, the textures of worn cobblestones beneath my feet, the cracks in centuries-old facades, ivy climbing with delicate tendrils along ancient walls, shuttered windows catching the first rays of light and the occasional pigeon cooing softly from a nearby rooftop. I pause at a small piazza where the fountains glimmer in the fragile sunlight, the water rippling gently, reflecting statues carved in exquisite detail, their expressions frozen yet somehow animated by the light and shadow that plays across their forms. A street artist begins setting up his easel in a quiet corner, brushes and paints arranged meticulously, capturing the soft interplay of morning light over the piazza, the gentle murmurs of the awakening city, and the shimmer of dew on stone and marble. The Pantheon rises before me as I wander, its portico glowing with the first warmth of the sun, the massive columns casting long, graceful shadows across the square. I step inside, the cool, sacred interior contrasting sharply with the bright streets outside, the vast dome above punctured by the oculus allowing a single beam of sunlight to pierce the air, illuminating dust motes that float like tiny stars in the golden column of light. Marble floors reflect subtle glimmers, the altars and statues standing silently in their centuries-old vigilance, and I feel the weight and the pulse of history beneath my feet, the countless pilgrims, tourists, and Romans who have walked here over centuries layered in a quiet hum beneath the echo of my own steps. Exiting, I drift toward Piazza Navona, where the fountains shimmer, statues cast delicate shadows, and the square, though still calm, hints at the energy that will soon fill it. The lanes leading toward Campo de' Fiori open slowly as vendors begin to set up their stalls, carefully arranging fresh vegetables, bright fruits, fragrant herbs, and colorful flowers. The rich scent of citrus, lemons and oranges mingling with basil and rosemary, drifts on the morning air, and I pause to watch. A vendor gently stacking crates of tomatoes, hands moving with practiced precision, the occasional clink of wood against produce, the rustle of leaves from small potted plants lining the stalls, and a child darting between tables, laughter piercing the quiet, momentary yet vivid against the soft morning hum. A cafe tucked into a corner begins brewing espresso, the aroma mingling seamlessly with the fragrances of fresh bread and fruit, and I order a cappuccino and cornetto, savoring the rich, bittersweet flavor of the coffee and the delicate, flaky pastry warm in my hands, while the city continues its gentle awakening around me. As the sun climbs slowly higher, Trastevere's narrow lanes glow softly, ivy-covered walls basking in the golden light, windows opening to reveal the first signs of domestic life, curtains fluttering in gentle breezes, the faint scent of simmering sauces drifting from kitchens, the sound of morning greetings exchanged in cheerful voices, and the delicate patter of feet on cobblestones. I pause at a small bridge over a quiet canal, watching water ripple in gentle patterns reflecting the sky and the surrounding buildings in a shimmering, distorted mirror, and feel the profound sense of history layered in every stone and surface. The city both alive and timeless, monumental yet intimately human, each detail meticulously woven into the rhythm of the day. Wandering further into the alleys and piazzas, I notice the subtle interplay of light and shadow as the morning sun illuminates ornate balconies, sculptures, and fountains. The intricate textures of centuries-old plaster and stone coming alive under the warm, soft rays. Shopkeepers begin, opening artisan stores, a leatherworker meticulously crafting wallets and belts, the smell of treated leather rich and intoxicating, a ceramist arranging hand-painted plates and vases, the colors vivid and warm under morning light. A small bookshop revealing shelves lined with hand-bound volumes, the scent of old paper and ink blending faintly with the city's other fragrances. Tourists and locals begin to mingle slowly, camera clicks punctuating the quiet, laughter drifting across piazzas, children playing near fountains, and musicians softly tuning their instruments in preparation for the day's performances. I pause, in a secluded corner of a small piazza, to watch a fountain, the water dancing gently over sculpted figures, light glimmering on the surface, creating reflections that ripple with an almost hypnotic rhythm. The shadows of surrounding buildings stretch across the stones, forming intricate patterns, the sound of water mingling with the soft footfalls of early risers, the distant toll of a church bell, and the faint rustle of leaves in a gentle morning breeze. Every detail seems heightened in this early hour. The coolness of the air on my skin, the texture of stone beneath my fingertips, the delicate aromas floating through the lanes, the interplay of sound, light, and movement, each element layering seamlessly into the sensory mosaic that is Rome at sunrise. The sun climbs steadily, and as I wander toward Piazza del Popolo, the square opens before me in a breathtaking panorama. Twin churches rise gracefully, fountains glimmer in the morning light, and the obelisk stands as a silent witness to centuries of history. Visitors begin to arrive, their footsteps merging with those of locals, the sound of conversation, camera shutters, and soft laughter layering with the distant hum of scooters threading through side streets. I ascend the steps to Pincio Terrace, the city unfurling below, rooftops glowing with the early sun, domes punctuating the horizon, the Tiber winding like a silver ribbon, bridges arching gracefully, and the faint shimmer of water reflecting the first rays of light. The air is rich with scent, fresh bread, blooming flowers, and the soft, almost imperceptible aroma of river water, and I pause to take it all in, each detail vivid, every moment alive. The city's heartbeat palpable beneath my own. I leave Pincio Terrace, descending slowly back into the bustling veins of Rome's morning streets, each step on the worn cobblestones resonating softly, connecting me to the countless travelers, merchants, and locals who have wandered here through centuries. Small alleys open unexpectedly into hidden piazzas, sunlight spilling through gaps between buildings, illuminating intricate mosaics on church facades, wrought iron balconies adorned with blooming flowers, and tiny fountains gurgling softly. At the center, their water sparkling like liquid crystal. I pause at one such piazza, where the morning light catches on a series of marble statues, highlighting the delicate carving of draped garments, the expressive tilt of heads, and the subtle emotion captured in stone. The gentle splash of water from the fountain mingles with the distant cooing of pigeons, the faint hum of an early street-cleaning cart, and the occasional bark of a dog, forming a serene symphony that feels timeless, as though the city itself breathes in rhythm with every sensory detail. Wandering further, I pass a small gelateria, its window lined with colors so vivid they seem almost to glow in the soft morning sun. Pistachio green, rich chocolate brown, bright blood orange, creamy, vanilla. The smell of fresh waffle cones mingles with the lingering aroma of coffee from a nearby cafe. A young woman behind the counter arranges scoops carefully, her movements precise, almost ceremonial, while a small child waits impatiently, eyes wide with excitement. I pause to savor a scoop of creamy pistachio gelato, its texture smooth, rich, and slightly cool against the warmth of the morning air. As I walk slowly, tasting each bite, I notice the interaction of locals. Shopkeepers greeting each other with cheerful buongiorno, a street musician tuning his violin in a corner, the soft murmur of conversations drifting through the streets, blending seamlessly with the aroma of fresh pastries and the delicate scent of flowers spilling from windowsills. Turning a corner, I find myself on a narrow lane lined with artisan shops. The leather workers' hands move with practiced precision, cutting, stitching, and molding hides into wallets and belts, the rich, earthy scent of leather mingling with sunlight that streams through the open doorway. A nearby ceramist, delicately, paints vibrant patterns onto plates and vases, colors dancing in the early morning light, while inside a tiny bookshop the subtle smell of aged paper and ink wraps around me like a comforting blanket. Each shop exudes its own character, the artisan's dedication visible in every movement, every brushstroke, every stitch, a tangible connection to centuries-old crafts preserved in the modern world. As I continue wandering, the streets gradually widen into larger squares. Piazza Navona, now brighter with the growing morning sun, comes alive with fountains glistening, water cascading in rhythmic motion, and statues standing proudly, their details crisp in the soft light. Street artists begin arranging easels, sketch pads, and paints, ready to capture the interplay of light, water, and stone. A few early tourists stroll cautiously, cameras in hand, pausing to photograph the fountain of the four rivers, their reflections shimmering on the water's surface. Cafes along the square begin preparing outdoor tables, small pastries arranged neatly, cups of espresso steaming gently, and the combined aroma of